The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar restaurant empire, Theodore Blackwood, went undercover to his own diner and sat down at a corner table when a nervous black waitress approached with trembling hands, quietly slipping him a folded note. What happened next would expose a million-dollar conspiracy, bring down a criminal empire, and leave the city's most powerful billionaire stunned beyond belief. Before we start, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's continue. The morning sun cast golden streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Theodore Blackwood's Manhattan penthouse, illuminating a space that screamed success but whispered loneliness. At 42, Theo possessed everything most men dreamed of: a net worth that could buy small countries, restaurants spanning 3 continents, and a reputation that made competitors tremble. Yet as he sat at his mahogany desk in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, reviewing quarterly reports with his morning espresso, the weight of isolation pressed against his chest like a stone. Blackwood Hospitality Group, Chicago location number 47, he muttered, his steel-gray eyes scanning the disappointing numbers. Revenue down 18%. Customer complaints up 32%. Employee turnover at an alarming 67%. The location that should have been his crown jewel, a classic American diner he'd personally designed to honor his grandmother's memory, was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Theo's jaw tightened as he read complaint after complaint. Rude staff. Cold food. Dirty tables. Felt unwelcome. Each review was a dagger to his heart. His grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood, had taught him that hospitality was sacred, that every guest deserved to feel like family. She'd worked double shifts at a small diner in Queens to put him through college, her hands permanently stained with coffee and her heart overflowing with warmth for strangers. "Teddy," her voice echoed in his memory, "a restaurant is about making people feel they belong somewhere." He'd built his empire on that principle, but somewhere along the way, corporate boards and profit margins had replaced personal connections. When was the last time he'd actually been inside one of his restaurants as anything other than an announced inspection? His phone buzzed, another text from his assistant about the charity gala that evening. Another night of forced smiles and hollow conversations with people who only saw his bank account. Theo stared at his reflection in the window, seeing a stranger in an expensive suit. Where was the passionate young man who'd once dreamed of creating places where people felt truly welcome? The Chicago location demanded answers. And Theodore Blackwood was going to get them, even if it meant trading his tailored suits for regular clothes and his penthouse for the real world. 600 miles away in Chicago's South Side, Zara Williams was fighting a different kind of battle. Her tiny apartment on Cottage Grove Avenue bore little resemblance to Theo's penthouse, but it overflowed with something his lacked: love, laughter, and the determined spirit of a woman who refused to let circumstances define her future. "Mama, I can't find my purple crayon," 6-year-old Amelia called from the kitchen table, her curls bouncing as she frantically searched through her art supplies. The little girl wore a bright yellow dress that Zara had found at a thrift store and tailored to perfection, her brown eyes sparkling with the same intelligence that had helped Zara survive every challenge life threw her way. "Check under your math homework, baby girl," Zara replied, her melodic voice carrying the warmth of someone who'd learned to find joy in small moments. At 28, she possessed a natural beauty that no amount of exhaustion could diminish. Caramel skin that glowed despite long hours, expressive dark eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. This morning, she wore her lucky red blouse and black slacks, the uniform that she hoped would help her get through another shift at Blackwood Diner. "Found it!" Amelia squealed, holding up the crayon like a trophy. "Now I can finish my picture of us in our new house." Zara's heart clenched. Their current apartment was clean but cramped, with thin walls that carried every argument from neighboring units and windows that looked out onto a parking lot instead of the garden Amelia dreamed about. But it was theirs, and Zara had worked 3 jobs to keep it that way after Amelia's father disappeared when their daughter was 2. "Tell me about this new house," Zara said, sitting beside her daughter and running gentle fingers through those beautiful curls. Amelia's face lit up. "It has a big kitchen where you can cook all your favorite recipes, and a yard where we can plant flowers, and my own room with purple walls and stars on the ceiling." "That sounds perfect, sweetheart." Zara's voice caught slightly. If only Amelia knew how precarious their situation really was. The job at Blackwood Diner barely covered their expenses, especially with the rent increase looming next month. But Amelia didn't need to carry that burden. Zara glanced at the envelope on the counter, the one containing her carefully saved tips from the past month. $347. Not nearly enough for Amelia's upcoming school field trip, let alone the security deposit for a better apartment. But it was progress, and Zara Williams had built her life on small victories. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. "Happy to watch Amelia after school today. That child is a blessing." "Mrs. Patterson's going to pick you up from school today," Zara told her daughter, helping her pack her backpack. "And remember our rule? Be kind, work hard, and never let anyone make me feel small," Amelia recited, her voice strong despite her young age. "That's my girl." Zara kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in the scent of the strawberry shampoo they'd splurged on last week. These morning moments were sacred, the calm before whatever storm waited at work. As they walked to the bus stop, Amelia's small hand tucked securely in hers, Zara tried to shake the unease that had been growing for weeks. Something was wrong at the diner. Money was disappearing from the tip pool. Employees were being threatened for asking questions. And District Manager Kevin Murphy watched everything with cold eyes that made her skin crawl. Yesterday, when she'd questioned why her paycheck was short again, Kevin had cornered her in the supply closet. His breath reeked of cigarettes as he whispered, "Careful, Zara. Single mothers in your situation can't afford to lose their jobs. Especially when they have such pretty little daughters." The threat had been clear, and it had kept her awake all night. But what choice did she have? She needed this job. Amelia needed stability. And going to the police meant risking everything when Kevin had connections throughout the city. "Mama, you okay?" Amelia's voice broke through her dark thoughts. Zara forced a bright smile. "Just thinking about how proud I am of you, baby girl." But as the bus approached, carrying them toward another uncertain day, Zara silently promised herself that somehow, someday, she'd find a way to protect her daughter and expose the truth. She just had to be smart about it. What do you think drives people to take risks for strangers? Have you ever had a moment where a small act of courage changed everything? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of unexpected connections that transform lives. The autumn wind whipped through downtown Chicago as Theodore Blackwood stepped out of his rented Honda Civic, a far cry from his usual Bentley. He'd traded his $1,000 suits for worn jeans, scuffed work boots, and a faded Northwestern University sweatshirt, clothes that would help him blend into the working-class neighborhood surrounding his restaurant. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, worth $2.3 billion, pretending to be ordinary to understand why his own business was failing. Blackwood Diner sat on the corner of 53rd and State Street, its red brick exterior and classic neon sign exactly as he'd envisioned 3 years ago. The lunch rush was in full swing, and through the large windows, he could see customers seated in the retro-style booths he'd personally selected. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But Theodore had learned that appearances could be deceiving. He pushed open the glass door, a small bell announcing his arrival. The interior maintained the 1950s aesthetic he'd fought the design team to preserve. Checkered floors, red vinyl booths, and a long counter with chrome stools. Photos of Chicago's history lined the walls, and a vintage jukebox played Sinatra in the corner. It should have felt like stepping into his grandmother's memory. Instead, the atmosphere felt tense, almost hostile. "Sit wherever you want," a tired-looking hostess mumbled without looking up from her phone. Her name tag read Kelly, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore the restaurant's signature burgundy uniform, but it was wrinkled and stained. Theodore chose a booth near the window, positioning himself where he could observe the entire dining room. What he saw made his stomach churn. Servers moved with obvious reluctance, their fake smiles dropping the moment they turned away from customers. Tables sat dirty for long minutes before being cleared. And behind the counter, he caught glimpses of staff members huddled in what looked like worried conversations. This wasn't the warm, welcoming environment he'd dreamed of creating. "Coffee." The voice was melodic despite its professional tone. Theodore looked up to find himself face to face with the most striking woman he'd seen in years. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with caramel skin that seemed to glow despite the fluorescent lighting, and dark eyes that held intelligence and something else, a wariness that spoke of hard-won wisdom. Her name tag read Zara, and she wore the burgundy uniform with a dignity that elevated the simple outfit. Unlike the other staff, her appearance was immaculate, every detail perfect despite what he suspected were challenging circumstances. "Please," he replied, trying to keep his voice casual. "Black." Something flickered in her eyes, a flash of recognition so quick he almost missed it. But she simply nodded and moved away, her movements graceful and efficient. Theodore watched her work as she moved between tables. Unlike her colleagues, Zara treated every customer with genuine warmth. She remembered an elderly man's preference for extra cream, helped a young mother clean up her toddler's spilled juice without complaint, and somehow managed to smile authentically even when dealing with a particularly rude businessman who snapped his fingers at her. When she returned with his coffee, Theodore was ready with his cover story. "Thanks," he said, affecting the casual tone of a construction worker on break. "Haven't been here before. Food any good?" "The apple pie is excellent," Zara replied, her voice carefully neutral. "My personal recommendation." She set the white ceramic mug in front of him, and that's when it happened. As she placed the coffee down, she smoothly slid a folded piece of paper underneath the saucer. The movement was so subtle, so perfectly executed, that anyone watching would have seen nothing more than a waitress serving coffee. But her eyes met his for just a moment, and in that glance, Theodore saw fear, determination, and something that made his blood run cold: desperation. "I know who you are," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the diner's ambient noise. "They're going to destroy you." Theodore's hand froze halfway to the coffee cup. His heart hammered against his ribs as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. She knew. This waitress, this stranger, had recognized him despite his careful disguise. Zara straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Can I get you anything else to start?" Theodore's throat felt dry. "The pie. You mentioned pie. Coming right up." Her smile was perfectly normal, giving no indication of the bombshell she'd just dropped. As she walked away, Theodore's mind raced. How had she recognized him? His photos rarely appeared in local media, and when they did, he was always in expensive suits with styled hair. Today, he looked like any other middle-aged man grabbing lunch. With trembling fingers, he carefully extracted the note from under his coffee cup, keeping it low and out of sight. The paper was small, torn from what looked like an order pad. The handwriting was neat, feminine, urgent. "They are stealing from you. Meet me, Millennium Park tonight at 8 p.m., near the Crown Fountain. Come alone." Theodore read the note twice, his coffee growing cold as the weight of the words sank in. Kevin Murphy. He'd hired Kevin 2 years ago based on glowing recommendations and impressive quarterly reports. The man had seemed professional, efficient, results-oriented. But if this note was true— Theodore folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his wallet, his mind already racing ahead to implications and solutions. But beneath the business analysis, something else stirred, a profound respect for the woman who'd just risked everything to warn him. Zara returned with a slice of apple pie that looked homemade, the crust golden and flaky. "Our baker made this fresh this morning," she said, setting it down with the same careful precision she'd used for the coffee. "Thank you," Theodore said, and this time he meant it for more than just the pie. She nodded once, a nearly imperceptible acknowledgement that his message had been received. Then she moved on to the next table, continuing her work as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Theodore forced himself to eat the pie, which was, indeed, excellent, while discreetly observing the restaurant with new eyes. Now he noticed the small things, servers glancing nervously toward the back office, the way conversation stopped when a tall man in a suit emerged to survey the dining room, the tension that seemed to permeate the entire space. The man in the suit had to be Kevin Murphy. Mid-40s, silver hair, expensive watch, and an air of authority that felt more like intimidation than leadership. He moved through the restaurant like he owned it, his pale blue eyes missing nothing. When Kevin's gaze swept past Theodore's table, those eyes lingered for just a moment, long enough to make Theodore wonder if his disguise was as effective as he'd hoped. 20 minutes later, Theodore paid his check and left, but not before catching one last glimpse of Zara. She was clearing a table near the window, and for just a moment, their eyes met again. In that brief connection, he saw the fear she'd been hiding, but also something else— hope. Walking back to his rental car, Theodore's mind churned with questions and possibilities. In the span of 30 minutes, a complete stranger had turned his world upside down. She'd risked her job, possibly her safety, to warn him about corruption in his own company. Who was she? Why had she recognized him? And most importantly, was she telling the truth? As he drove away from the diner, Theodore made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Tonight, at 8 o'clock, he would find out exactly what Zara Williams was willing to risk everything to tell him. Behind him, through the restaurant's window, Zara watched the Honda Civic disappear into traffic. Her hands shook slightly as she cleared the last plates from his table, but her resolve was iron strong. She'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. Whatever happened next, she'd finally chosen courage over fear. For Amelia. For herself. And maybe, just maybe, for the man who might be their only hope for justice. Theodore sat in his rental car 3 blocks from the diner, hands gripping the steering wheel as his mind waged war with itself. The note felt like it was burning a hole through his wallet, each word echoing in his thoughts with increasing intensity. Kevin Murphy is stealing from you. Your people are in serious trouble. We're scared. Part of him, the successful businessman who'd built an empire from nothing, wanted to dismiss this as the ramblings of a disgruntled employee. People made accusations all the time, usually when they weren't performing well themselves. Kevin's quarterly reports had been solid, his efficiency ratings high. The numbers didn't lie. But those eyes— Zara's eyes had held something that couldn't be faked, genuine terror mixed with desperate hope. Theodore pulled out his phone and scrolled to Kevin Murphy's contact information. His thumb hovered over the call button. The logical move would be to confront his district manager directly, demand explanations, get to the bottom of this immediately. Instead, he found himself thinking about the way Zara had whispered those words. "They're going to destroy you." Not, "He's going to destroy you." They. Multiple people. A conspiracy. If Kevin was truly involved in something criminal, calling him now would be like announcing an investigation before it began. Evidence could disappear. Witnesses could be silenced. Or threatened further. Theodore set the phone down and started the engine. He needed more information before making any moves. Meanwhile, back at Blackwood Diner. Zara's hands trembled as she refilled the coffee pot for the third time in 10 minutes. The lunch rush was winding down, but her nervous energy made it impossible to stand still. Every time the back office door opened, her heart jumped. Every footstep behind her made her shoulders tense. What had she done? "You okay, honey?" asked Dorothy, the veteran waitress who'd been working at the diner since before Theodore bought it. At 62, Dorothy had seen everything the restaurant industry could throw at someone, and she developed a sixth sense for when her colleagues were struggling. "Fine," Zara replied automatically, but her voice came out an octave too high. Dorothy moved closer, pretending to organize napkin dispensers while keeping her voice low. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Did that customer give you trouble? The one in the northwestern sweatshirt." Zara's blood ran cold. Had Dorothy noticed something? Had anyone else seen her pass the note? "No trouble," she managed. "Just tired." But Dorothy's weathered face showed concern. "Zara, baby, I've been doing this for 40 years. I know when someone's rattled. If you're having problems with money again, or if someone's bothering you." "Dorothy, everything's fine," Zara interrupted, hating how sharp her voice sounded. Dorothy had been nothing but kind to her since she'd started working here 18 months ago, but Zara couldn't risk involving her in this mess. The older woman's expression softened. "All right, but you know where to find me if you need to talk." As Dorothy walked away, Zara felt a stab of guilt. She'd been lying to everyone lately, to Dorothy, to her neighbor Mrs. Patterson who watched Amelia after school, even to her daughter when she asked why Mommy looked so worried all the time. The lies were necessary. Kevin Murphy had made that crystal clear 3 weeks ago when he'd cornered her in the supply closet. "You seem like a smart girl, Zara," he'd said, his cologne overwhelming in the small space. "Smart enough to know that some things are better left unobserved, unmentioned, forgotten." She'd nodded, terrified, as his pale eyes bored into hers. "Good. Because accidents happen in this business. People lose their jobs. Sometimes they lose more than that. And it would be such a shame if something happened to that pretty little daughter of yours." The threat had been delivered in the same pleasant tone Kevin used when discussing menu changes with customers. But Zara had seen the steel beneath his smile, and she'd known he wasn't bluffing. For 3 weeks, she'd kept her mouth shut. She'd watched Kevin and his cronies, assistant manager Brad Peterson and head cook Tony Romano, systematically steal from the restaurant and intimidate the staff. She'd seen them skim cash from the registers, inflate vendor invoices, and pocket the difference. She'd witnessed them sell prime steaks out the back door to their friends while marking them as spoiled in the inventory system. But today, when she'd recognized Theodore Blackwood sitting in booth 7, something inside her had snapped. Maybe it was the irony of seeing the restaurant's actual owner being deceived in his own establishment. Maybe it was the memory of her father, who'd taught her that silence in the face of injustice was complicity. Or maybe it was simply the desperate hope that someone with real power might finally be able to stop the nightmare that her workplace had become. Whatever the reason, she'd acted on impulse, and now she was terrified. Zara! The voice behind her was calm, friendly, and absolutely terrifying. Zara turned to find Kevin Murphy standing 3 feet away, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the October humidity, his charcoal suit immaculate. "Kevin," she replied, proud that her voice came out steady. "How can I help you? Could you step into my office for a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss." "It wasn't a request." Zara nodded and followed him toward the back of the restaurant, past the kitchen where Tony Romano was aggressively chopping vegetables, past the storage area where Brad Peterson was supposedly taking inventory. Kevin's office was small but well-appointed, with a mahogany desk that probably cost more than Zara made in 2 months. Sports memorabilia lined the walls, signed footballs, framed jerseys, photos of Kevin with various Chicago athletes. The overall effect was meant to be impressive, but to Zara, it felt like a cage. Kevin closed the door and gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk. He settled into his leather executive chair with a satisfied smile of a predator who'd cornered his prey. "You've been with us for 18 months now," he began conversationally. "Excellent attendance, good customer reviews, no complaints. A model employee." "Thank you," Zara said carefully. "Which is why I was surprised to hear from Tony that you seemed agitated during the lunch rush. Distracted. Making mistakes." Zara's heart pounded. She hadn't made any mistakes. She was always careful about that. But Tony Romano had been watching her, probably reporting back to Kevin about her behavior. "I'm sorry if I seemed distracted," she said. "I have a lot on my mind with my daughter starting a new school program." "Ah yes, Amelia. 6 years old now, isn't she? Such a bright little girl. I saw her picture on your locker. Beautiful child." The way he said it made Zara's skin crawl. Kevin had no business knowing her daughter's name or age, and the fact that he'd been looking at the photos in her locker felt like a violation. "She is," Zara replied, keeping her voice neutral despite the rage building in her chest. Kevin leaned forward, his pale blue eyes never leaving her face. "I hope she stays safe. Chicago can be such a dangerous city for children. All those busy streets, all those strangers who might not have her best interests at heart." The threat was barely veiled, but it was unmistakably there. Zara felt her resolve wavering. What was she thinking, trying to take on someone like Kevin Murphy? He had money, connections, power. She was just a single mother trying to survive. But then she thought about the note currently sitting in Theodore Blackwood's wallet. She'd already crossed the line. There was no going back now. "I understand your concern," she said quietly. "I'll make sure Amelia is always careful." Kevin studied her face for a long moment, clearly looking for signs of defiance or deception. Finally, he sat back in his chair. "Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Oh, and Zara, that customer you served today, the one in the Northwestern sweatshirt. Did he say anything unusual? Ask any strange questions?" Zara's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself to appear confused. "Strange questions? No, I don't think so. He just ordered coffee and pie." "Why?" "Just curious." He seemed to be observing the restaurant quite carefully. Made me wonder if he might be from the health department, or perhaps a food critic. "I didn't notice anything unusual," Zara lied smoothly. "He seemed like a regular customer to me." Kevin nodded slowly. "I'm sure you're right. After all, you're very observant. I'm confident you would have mentioned anything noteworthy. The emphasis on the last word sent chills down Zara's spine. Kevin suspected something, but he wasn't sure what. That gave her a small advantage, but she knew it wouldn't last long. "Is there anything else?" she asked, rising from her chair. "Not at all. Thank you for your time." Zara left the office on unsteady legs, Kevin's threats echoing in her mind. As she returned to the dining room, she caught Tony Romano's eyes following her movements. Brad Peterson emerged from the storage room and gave her a cold smile that made her stomach turn. They were watching her now. All of them. Waiting for her to make a mistake, to give them an excuse to follow through on their threats. But it was too late to back down. In 6 hours, she would either save Theodore Blackwood's business and protect her fellow employees, or she would face consequences too terrible to imagine. As she returned to work, clearing tables and refilling coffee cups with mechanical precision, Zara made peace with her choice. She'd spent too much of her life being afraid of her ex-husband, afraid of poverty, afraid of taking risks that might make things worse. Tonight, for the first time in years, she was going to choose courage over fear. Whatever the cost. 5 miles away, Theodore Blackwood sat in his hotel room, staring at Zara's note and wrestling with his own doubts. In 3 hours, he would learn whether his faith in a stranger's courage was justified, or whether he was walking into the biggest mistake of his life. The October evening air carried the crisp promise of winter as Theodore walked through Millennium Park, his breath forming small clouds in the 40-degree weather. He'd changed from his northwestern sweatshirt into dark jeans and a navy wool coat, wanting to look approachable but not conspicuous. The park was busy enough with evening joggers and tourists that their meeting wouldn't draw attention. He found himself walking slower as he approached the Crown Fountain, where families were gathering to watch the LED faces project onto the glass towers. His palms were sweating despite the cold. In 37 years of business dealings, he'd negotiated million-dollar acquisitions, faced hostile boardrooms, and built an empire from a single failing restaurant. None of that had prepared him for this moment of uncertainty. What if this was an elaborate setup? What if Zara was working with Kevin Murphy to entrap him somehow? What if she was simply a troubled employee looking for attention or money? But as he replayed their brief interaction from the afternoon, Theodore couldn't shake the memory of genuine fear in her eyes. That kind of terror couldn't be faked. At exactly 7:58 p.m., he spotted her approaching from the direction of Michigan Avenue. She'd changed from her work uniform into dark leggings, brown boots, and an oversized burgundy sweater that made her look younger and more vulnerable than she had behind the diner counter. Her natural hair was pulled back in a high bun, and she moved with a quick, purposeful stride of someone accustomed to being efficient with their time. Their eyes met across the fountain area, and Theodore felt an unexpected jolt of recognition, not just of her face, but of something deeper. She looked like someone carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, and he understood that feeling intimately. Zara approached cautiously, her dark eyes scanning the area before settling on his face. "You came," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the fountain's gentle splashing. "I said I would," Theodore replied. "Though I'll admit, I'm not sure what I expected. Walk with me." Zara gestured toward the less crowded path leading toward the Lurie Garden. "I don't want to be overheard." They fell into step together, maintaining careful distance as they moved away from the main tourist areas. The silence stretched between them for several moments before Zara spoke again. "I need you to know that I'm terrified right now," she said, her voice steady despite her admission. "If Kevin Murphy finds out I'm talking to you, I don't know what he'll do. But I can't watch this continue anymore." Theodore studied her profile as they walked. What exactly is this? Zara stopped walking and turned to face him fully. In the soft glow of the park's lighting, he could see the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. They're stealing from you, Mr. Blackwood. Not just skimming the till or pocketing tips. We're talking about systematic theft that's probably cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 2 years. The use of his real name sent a chill through Theodore. How did you know who I was? A small smile crossed Zara's face for the first time since he'd met her. You were on the cover of Chicago Business Weekly 3 months ago. The article was about your expansion into the Pacific Northwest. I read it while waiting at my daughter's pediatrician office. You read business magazines? I read everything I can get my hands on, Zara replied with quiet dignity. Knowledge is the only thing nobody can take away from you. Her words hit Theodore unexpectedly hard. Here was a waitress, a single mother, based on her earlier mention of a daughter, who spent her free time educating herself, while he'd become so disconnected from his own business that criminal activity had flourished under his nose. Tell me what you know, he said. Zara resumed walking, her hands shoved deep in her sweater pockets. It started small, maybe 2 years ago. Kevin would accidentally ring up meals as smaller amounts, then pocket the difference. Or he'd mark premium ingredients as spoiled when they were perfectly fine, then sell them to his friends. Brad Peterson, he's the assistant manager. He got involved about a year ago. Tony Romano, our head cook, joined them 6 months later. What kind of amounts are we talking about? I estimate between $3,000 and $5,000 a week, Zara said quietly. They've gotten bolder recently. Last month, Kevin created fake vendor invoices for kitchen equipment that was never delivered. The invoices went to companies owned by his brother-in-law in Naperville. Theodore felt his jaw clench. The Blackwood Diner on North Clark Street had been underperforming for 2 years, showing declining profits despite steady customer traffic. He'd attributed it to increased competition and rising food costs. Instead, his own employees had been systematically robbing him. Why didn't you report this to the police? To corporate? Zara's laugh was bitter. You mean the corporate number that routes directly to Kevin Murphy's office? As for the police... She paused, choosing her words carefully. 3 weeks ago, Kevin pulled me aside after my shift. He told me that employees who observed too much sometimes had accidents. Sometimes their families had accidents. The casual way she delivered the threat made Theodore's blood run cold. He threatened your daughter? By name, Zara confirmed, her voice hardening. He knows where we live, where she goes to school, even which aftercare program she attends. He made it very clear that keeping quiet was the only way to keep her safe. They had reached a more secluded area of the park, surrounded by tall grasses and prairie flowers that rustled in the evening breeze. Theodore stopped walking and turned to face Zara directly. If you were too scared to report this before, why are you telling me now? What changed? Zara met his gaze steadily. Because I realized that staying silent wasn't protecting my daughter, it was teaching her that injustice should be tolerated. My father died when I was 16, but before he passed, he told me something I've never forgotten. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Her voice caught slightly on the word father, and Theodore saw a glimpse of the pain she carried beneath her composed exterior. He was a security guard at a factory in Cicero, she continued. When he discovered that the foreman was cutting corners on safety protocols to save money, he reported it to OSHA. The foreman was fired, the safety violations were corrected, And 3 months later, my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Completely unrelated, but he always said that doing the right thing gave him peace during his final months. Theodore found himself genuinely moved by her story. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. But my point is, I can't live with myself knowing that Kevin and his friends are not only stealing from you, but creating a toxic environment where good people are afraid to come to work. Dorothy, she's our senior waitress. She's been having panic attacks because Kevin screams at the staff when customers can't hear. Luis, one of our line cooks, asked Kevin if he could have Sundays off to take his elderly mother to church. Kevin cut his hours in half and told him that family time was a luxury he couldn't afford. With each example, Theodore felt his anger building. These weren't just financial crimes. They were crimes against human dignity. What do you need from me? He asked. Evidence, Zara replied immediately. Kevin's too smart to leave obvious traces, but there are patterns. Financial discrepancies, inventory irregularities, vendor relationships that don't make sense. I've been keeping track as much as I can without arousing suspicion. She reached into her sweater pocket and withdrew a small notebook, its pages filled with neat handwriting. Dates, amounts, descriptions of what I witnessed. It's not comprehensive, but it's a start. Theodore accepted the notebook, flipping through pages of meticulous documentation. Zara had recorded everything from suspicious cash transactions to overheard phone conversations. The level of detail was impressive and heartbreaking. She'd been building a case against her tormentors while living in fear for her safety. This is remarkable, he said honestly. But gathering evidence is dangerous work. If they suspect you're documenting their activities, they already suspect something, Zara admitted. Kevin questioned me about you today. He knows I served you, and he's wondering if you were asking unusual questions or if I noticed anything strange about your behavior. What did you tell him? That you seemed like a regular customer. But I don't think he believed me completely. Tony Romano has been watching me more closely lately, and Brad Peterson has started, accidentally, bumping into me when I'm trying to work. They're trying to intimidate me. Theodore felt a surge of protective anger that surprised him with its intensity. We need to get you out of that environment. I can arrange for you to transfer to another location, or... No, Zara interrupted firmly. If I suddenly quit or transfer, they'll know I talked to someone. Besides, you need someone on the inside to help you gather evidence. I'm the only employee willing to take that risk. It's too dangerous. If they hurt you... Mr. Blackwood, Zara said quietly, I've been in danger since the day I witnessed their first crime and chose to stay silent. At least now I'm doing something about it. Her courage humbled him. Here was a woman with everything to lose. Her job, her safety, possibly her life, and she was willing to risk it all to do what was right. Meanwhile, he'd been sitting in boardrooms and penthouses, completely oblivious to the suffering of his own employees. What do you need me to do? He asked. Come back to the restaurant tomorrow, but not as a customer. Kevin's planning to be there early, around 6 a.m., to receive a special delivery from one of his fake vendors. If you could observe that transaction... I'll be there, Theodore said immediately. But I want you to promise me something. If the situation becomes too dangerous, if you feel threatened in any way, you get out immediately. You call me, and I'll make sure you and your daughter are protected. Zara looked surprised by his concern. You barely know me. Why would you? Because what you're doing takes incredible courage, Theodore replied honestly. and because nobody should have to choose between their safety and their principles. For a moment, something shifted in Zara's expression. The careful distance she'd been maintaining seemed to soften, and Theodore caught a glimpse of the woman she might be when she wasn't living in fear. "Thank you," she said simply. "I haven't had anyone offer to protect me in a very long time." The vulnerability in her voice made Theodore's chest tighten. "How long have you been on your own?" "Since Amelia was born 6 years ago." "Her father." Zara paused, then seemed to decide on honesty. "Let's just say he wasn't interested in the responsibility of parenthood." "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. But it also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. And that Amelia deserves to see her mother standing up for what's right, even when it's scary." They had circled back toward the fountain area, where the evening crowd was beginning to thin out. Theodore realized he didn't want their conversation to end. For the first time in months, he was talking to someone who wasn't trying to impress him or get something from him. Someone who was simply, courageously honest. "Zara," he said, "after we resolve this situation with Kevin and his associates, would you consider staying on? Not as a waitress, but in a management position. The company needs people with your integrity and observational skills." She looked genuinely shocked. "You'd offer me a job based on one conversation?" "I'd offer you a job based on your character," Theodore replied. "Everything you've done, documenting the crimes, risking your safety to inform me, refusing to be intimidated, those are leadership qualities." Zara was quiet for a long moment, absorbing his words. "I've been planning to go back to school," she said finally, "to get my business degree. But childcare costs and tuition." She shrugged. "It always seemed impossible." What if it wasn't impossible? What if there was a way to work and study simultaneously, with the company supporting your education? "Are you serious?" The hope in her voice was almost heartbreaking. Theodore realized that for all her strength and dignity, Zara had been struggling alone for so long that the idea of genuine support seemed foreign to her. "Completely serious," he confirmed. "But first, we need to take down the people who've been terrorizing you and stealing from the company." Zara nodded, her expression growing determined again. "Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I'll text you the address of the loading dock behind the restaurant. Kevin usually meets his vendors there to avoid the security cameras in the main dining area." "I'll be there. And Zara, be careful tonight. Don't do anything that might raise suspicion." "I will." "And Mr. Blackwood? Thank you for believing me. I wasn't sure you would." As she turned to leave, Theodore found himself calling after her. "It's Theodore. Just Theodore." She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her, and the transformation was remarkable. Despite everything she'd endured, despite the fear and exhaustion, there was still light in her eyes. "Good night, Theodore." As he watched her disappear into the Chicago evening, Theodore felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose that went beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of reclaiming his business. But more importantly, he would help a remarkable woman reclaim her life. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. If Kevin Murphy thought he could intimidate Theodore Blackwood's employees and steal from his company, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Theodore sat in his black Mercedes-Benz G-Class SUV, parked across the street from the loading dock behind Blackwood Diner. The morning air was crisp at 38 degrees, and a light fog rolled off Lake Michigan, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere in the pre-dawn darkness. He'd been there since 5:15 a.m., nursing a cup of coffee from a nearby 24-hour Dunkin' Donuts and trying to calm his nerves. His phone buzzed with a text from Zara. Kevin just arrived. White van pulling up now. Stay hidden. Through the fog, Theodore watched as an unmarked white cargo van backed up to the restaurant's rear entrance. Kevin Murphy emerged from the building, his bulky frame moving with surprising stealth as he helped unload several boxes marked Premium Beef, Chicago Wholesale Meats. But Theodore had been in the restaurant business long enough to recognize the difference between legitimate food service deliveries and something else entirely. Real meat deliveries came in refrigerated trucks with proper logos and documentation. This looked more like a drug deal than a food transaction. He raised the small digital camera he'd brought and began taking photos, the telephoto lens capturing clear images despite the distance and poor lighting. Kevin was exchanging envelopes with the van driver, definitely not standard procedure for any legitimate business transaction. 20 minutes later, after the van had departed and Kevin had disappeared back into the restaurant, Theodore's phone rang. "Did you see everything?" Zara's voice was barely above a whisper. "I saw enough." "Those weren't food deliveries, were they?" "No." Kevin's been using the restaurant as a distribution point for his brother-in-law's stolen merchandise operation. Electronics, jewelry, even designer clothing. He stores everything in the walk-in freezer that's supposedly broken, and then moves it through what looks like legitimate restaurant supply deliveries. Theodore felt his jaw clench. How long has this been going on? At least 8 months. Maybe longer. I only figured it out 3 months ago when I came in early for a double shift and saw Kevin loading iPads into takeout containers. Jesus. We're not just talking about embezzlement anymore. This is organized crime. There was a pause before Zara responded. "Theodore, there's something else you need to know. Something I didn't tell you last night because it's personal, and I wasn't sure if I could trust you yet." "What is it? Can you meet me somewhere private? Not the restaurant, obviously, but somewhere we can talk without being overheard." Theodore glanced at his watch. 6:15 a.m. "Do you know Lincoln Park Zoo? There's a coffee cart that opens early near the farm in the zoo exhibit. I can be there in 30 minutes. I told Kevin I had a doctor's appointment this morning, so I have a few hours before I need to be back. I'll see you there." The zoo was nearly empty except for early morning joggers and a few dedicated photographers hoping to catch the animals during their most active hours. Theodore found Zara sitting on a bench near the farm exhibit, watching a group of rescued goats play in their enclosure. She'd changed from her work clothes into dark jeans, comfortable walking shoes, and a forest green jacket that brought out the warm undertones in her brown skin. "You look different," he said as he approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the cart. "Different how?" Zara accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Less guarded. More relaxed. That's what happens when I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if Kevin Murphy is going to corner me in the supply closet again." Theodore felt anger flare in his chest. "He's been cornering you?" "Among other things." Zara's voice was steady, but Theodore could see the tension in her shoulders. "That's part of what I need to tell you about." They walked slowly along the path, their footsteps echoing in the quiet morning air. Other than the distant sounds of the city waking up and the occasional animal call, they had the peaceful space mostly to themselves. 3 months ago, Zara began, Kevin started paying more attention to me. At first, I thought it was because he suspected I knew about the stealing. But then he started making comments about my appearance, standing too close when he talked to me, finding excuses to touch my shoulder or my hand. Theodore's grip tightened on his coffee cup. Sexual harassment. It escalated quickly. 2 months ago, he offered me a promotion to assistant manager. When I asked about the job responsibilities, he said my main duty would be keeping him happy after hours. When I declined, he told me that employees who weren't team players often found their hours cut or their employment terminated for performance issues. Why didn't you file a complaint with HR? Zara gave him a look that was part disbelief, part pity. Theodore, Kevin Murphy is HR for that location. All employee complaints go through him. The corporate structure you've set up makes him essentially untouchable at the restaurant level. The criticism stung because it was accurate. In his drive to decentralize management and reduce corporate overhead, Theodore had given district managers like Kevin too much autonomy. He'd created a system that could be easily exploited by unscrupulous people. "I'm going to fix that," he said quietly. "The whole structure needs to be overhauled." "I believe you will. But for now, I need you to understand why this situation is so dangerous for me personally. It's not just about witnessing financial crimes anymore." They stopped walking near a small pond where ducks were swimming lazy circles in the morning light. Zara sat down on another bench, and Theodore joined her, maintaining respectful distance while staying close enough to hear her quiet voice. "Last week, Kevin called me into his office after my shift. He said he'd been thinking about my situation as a single mother, and how difficult it must be to make ends meet on a waitress's salary. Then he offered me an extra $500 a week to spend time with him outside of work." Theodore felt nauseated. "He offered to pay you for sex." "Not in those exact words, but yes. When I told him I wasn't interested, he reminded me that he had my address, my daughter's school information, and that good childcare was expensive. He said it would be unfortunate if anything happened to my job, because then I might not be able to afford to keep Amelia in her current school." "He threatened your daughter again." "More subtly this time, but yes. And then he showed me photos." "What kind of photos?" Zara's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew her phone. She scrolled through several images before handing it to Theodore. "I took these secretly when he was showing me. Look at the timestamps." Theodore studied the phone screen. The photos showed Amelia at her elementary school, at the park near their apartment, even walking home from her aftercare program. All taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, all dated within the past 2 weeks. "He's been stalking your daughter. Her and me both. Last Sunday, we went to Navy Pier for the afternoon. When we got home, there was a note under my door that said, 'Amelia looked beautiful in her pink dress today. Hope she had fun on the Ferris wheel.'" Theodore handed the phone back, his mind racing. This wasn't just workplace harassment or even organized crime. This was systematic stalking and intimidation of a woman and child. Kevin Murphy wasn't just a thief. He was a predator. "Zara, why didn't you go to the police with this? Stalking and threatening a child." "With what evidence?" she interrupted. "A note with no fingerprints? Photos that could have been taken by anyone?" Kevin's smart enough to never make explicit threats in writing, and he's friendly with several Chicago PD officers who eat at the restaurant regularly. Detective Ray Kowalski has lunch there twice a week, and Kevin always comps his meals. They joke around like old friends. Theodore was beginning to understand the full scope of what Zara was facing. She wasn't just dealing with a workplace bully. She was trapped in a web of corruption that extended into local law enforcement. "But you decided to trust me anyway. Why?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, watching the ducks glide across the pond's surface. Because I did my research on you after I recognized you yesterday. I spent 3 hours last night reading every article I could find about Theodore Blackwood and Blackwood Hospitality Group. What did you find? I found out that you started with one failing restaurant in Pilsen when you were 25 years old. The previous owner was going to close it, which would have put 12 people out of work. You bought it with money you borrowed against your father's life insurance policy. Theodore was surprised she'd dug that deep into his background. That particular detail hadn't been covered in most of the business profiles written about him. I found out that when the 2008 financial crisis hit, instead of laying off employees, you took a second mortgage on your house to keep paying them while you waited for business to recover. How did you find that information? Chicago Tribune Archives. There was a small feature story about local businesses that didn't lay anyone off during the recession. You were interviewed, but you asked them not to mention the mortgage because you didn't want your employees to feel guilty. Theodore had forgotten about that interview. It seemed like a lifetime ago. I also found the story about Maria Rodriguez, Zara continued, and Theodore's breath caught in his throat. Maria Rodriguez. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over 3 years. What story? He asked carefully. 5 years ago, one of your waitresses in Evanston was killed by her ex-boyfriend. Maria Rodriguez, 23 years old, mother of 2 young children. When she died, you personally paid for her funeral and set up college funds for both her kids. You also hired her mother as a manager at your Lincoln Park location and helped her get citizenship. Theodore felt the familiar ache that always accompanied memories of Maria. She'd been a bright, hard-working young woman who'd been trying to escape an abusive relationship. He'd offered her extra shifts and even helped her find a safe apartment, but it hadn't been enough. Her ex-boyfriend had found her anyway. The newspaper said you visited her children every month for 2 years, Zara said softly. That you attended every school play, every birthday party, every soccer game. That's not something a heartless businessman does. That's something a good man does. I should have done more to protect her, Theodore said quietly. If I'd known how dangerous her situation was. You did everything you could. Just like you're doing everything you can to help me now. Theodore looked at Zara, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time since they'd met. She wasn't just a brave employee trying to expose corruption. She was an intelligent, resourceful woman who'd researched him thoroughly before deciding to trust him with her life and her daughter's safety. That's why you knew you could trust me, he realized. Because of Maria. Because of how you handled Maria's situation, yes. But also because of what I saw in your eyes yesterday when I gave you that note. You weren't angry about being deceived or frustrated about business losses. You were concerned about the people being hurt. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the zoo slowly come to life around them. Theodore found himself studying Zara's profile, the strong line of her jaw, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the graceful way she held her coffee cup with both hands to warm her fingers. Tell me about Amelia, he said eventually. Zara's entire demeanor brightened at the mention of her daughter. She's incredible. 6 years old, starting first grade at Roosevelt Elementary. She's obsessed with dinosaurs and wants to be a paleontologist when she grows up. She's also convinced that she's going to discover a new species and name it after her grandmother. What was your grandmother's name? Beatrice. So we're going to have Ameliasaurus Beatrice wandering around prehistoric Earth someday. Theodore found himself smiling at the image. She sounds wonderful. She is. She's also the reason I can't just quit my job and disappear, even though that might be the safest option. Amelia needs stability, routine, friends. She's already been through too much change in her short life. Because of her father? Zara's expression darkened slightly. Marcus was. Let's say he wasn't ready for the reality of parenthood. When Amelia was born with some minor complications, nothing serious, just some feeding issues that required extra medical attention, he decided that fatherhood was too stressful for him. He left when she was 4 months old. Has he been in contact since then? Birthday cards twice. No phone calls, no visits, no child support. Which is honestly fine with me. Amelia deserves better than a father who sees her as a burden. Theodore felt another surge of protective anger, this time directed at a man he'd never met. You've been supporting her completely on your own? Waitressing, some freelance bookkeeping when I can find it, and I clean office buildings on weekends when Amelia's staying with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. It's not glamorous, but we manage. Bookkeeping. I was an accounting major before I had to drop out of college. I'm good with numbers, patterns, financial analysis. That's actually how I first noticed the discrepancies in the restaurant's daily receipts. Theodore stared at her. You're telling me that you've been working as a waitress when you have accounting skills? I'm telling you that I've been working whatever jobs I could get that would provide health insurance and flexible enough hours to take care of my daughter. Accounting firms don't typically offer part-time positions with full benefits. But if you had the right opportunity. If I had the right opportunity, I'd love to finish my degree and work in financial management. I'd love to analyze business operations and help companies improve their efficiency and profitability. I'd love to do work that uses my brain instead of just my ability to carry plates and smile at rude customers. The passion in her voice was unmistakable. Theodore realized he was looking at someone who'd been forced by circumstances to accept far less than what she was capable of achieving. After we resolve this situation with Kevin, he said, I want to offer you a position in corporate financial analysis. You'd work directly with me and my CFO to examine operations across all our locations. Zara turned to stare at him. You're offering me a job I'm not qualified for. You're more qualified than you think. You identified a complex embezzlement scheme that my certified accountants missed. You documented criminal activity with meticulous detail. You recognized patterns in financial data that escaped trained auditors. Those are exactly the skills I need. Theodore, I don't have a college degree. We'll arrange for you to finish your education while you work. Part-time classes, flexible schedule, full tuition reimbursement. And Amelia would be covered under our executive health plan, which includes pediatric care at Children's Hospital of Chicago. For the first time since he'd met her, Zara looked genuinely overwhelmed. Why would you do all that for someone you barely know? Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted carrying plates in a restaurant where you're being harassed by criminals. And because. Theodore paused, realizing he was about to say something that might change the dynamic between them completely. Because I've spent the last 2 days thinking about you, and not just because of the business situation. Zara's eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? I mean that yesterday, when you handed me that note, something shifted for me. It wasn't just about uncovering corruption or protecting my business. It was about this incredibly brave, intelligent woman who was willing to risk everything to do what was right. I haven't been able to stop thinking about that. About you. The admission hung in the air between them. Theodore immediately worried that he'd overstepped, that he was making an already complicated situation even more difficult. But Zara didn't pull away or change the subject. Instead, she studied his face with those perceptive dark eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Theodore," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for a rescuer. I don't need someone to swoop in and fix my life for me. That's not what I'm trying to do." "Let me finish," she said gently but firmly. "I'm not looking for a rescuer, but I haven't had a partner in a very long time. Someone who sees me as an equal, someone who respects my intelligence and my strength. Someone who wants to build something together instead of just taking care of me." Theodore felt his heart rate accelerate. "Is that what you think I'm offering? A partnership?" "I think," Zara said carefully, "that you're offering me professional opportunities that I've earned through my own skills and observations. And I think you're also telling me that you're attracted to me as a person, not just grateful for my help with a business problem." "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "Then I should probably tell you that I've been thinking about you too. Not just as Theodore Blackwood, the CEO, but as the man who listened to me last night without judgment, who believed me when I told him about Kevin's threats, who's sitting here at 7 a.m. talking to me about my daughter and my dreams instead of just focusing on his business problems." The connection between them was undeniable now, electric and warm despite the cool morning air. Theodore found himself leaning slightly closer to her on the bench. "This is complicated," he said softly. "Extremely complicated," Zara agreed. "I'm still technically your employee. You're about to help me expose crimes that could put dangerous people in prison. And I have a 6-year-old daughter who comes first in every decision I make. I wouldn't expect anything less. Amelia should come first." "But," Zara continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "complicated doesn't mean impossible. It just means we need to be careful and honest with each other." Theodore's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and saw Kevin Murphy's name. "It's him," he told Zara. "Kevin's calling me." "Answer it," she said immediately, her demeanor shifting back into alert mode. "But put it on speaker so I can hear." Theodore accepted the call. "Hello, Mr. Blackwood. This is Kevin Murphy, District Manager for your North Clark Street location. I understand you visited us yesterday as a customer." Kevin's voice was professionally cordial, but Theodore could hear an undercurrent of suspicion. "That's right. I try to visit all our locations periodically to maintain quality standards." "Of course, sir. I hope everything met with your satisfaction. The food was excellent. The service was memorable." Zara shot him a look, but Theodore kept his expression neutral. "I'm glad to hear that, sir. I wanted to reach out because one of our employees mentioned that you seemed particularly interested in our operations. I just wanted to make sure we addressed any concerns you might have." "No concerns at all. Just routine observation." "Excellent. Well, if you do decide to visit again, please let me know in advance. I'd love to give you a proper tour of our facilities, show you some of the improvements we've been implementing." "I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for calling, Kevin." "Thank you, sir. Have a great day." Theodore ended the call and looked at Zara. He knows. He suspects. There's a difference, but not much of one. Zara stood up from the bench, suddenly energized. "We need to move faster than we planned. If Kevin thinks you're investigating him, he'll start destroying evidence and possibly relocating his operation. What do you suggest?" "Tonight. There's a delivery scheduled for 11 p.m., much larger than usual. Kevin told the staff that we're receiving our weekly food shipment, but I know our actual food deliveries come on Thursday mornings from legitimate vendors. You want me to be there tonight? I want us to be there tonight. You'll need someone inside to verify what's happening and to make sure you're recording the right people doing the right things. Theodore felt his protective instincts flare again. Absolutely not. If something goes wrong and I'm not there to explain what you're seeing, your evidence might not hold up in court. Theodore, I know you want to protect me, but I'm already in this as deep as it's possible to be. The only way out is through. She was right, and he knew it. But the thought of putting her in more danger made his chest tight with anxiety. There's one more thing, Zara said, checking her watch. I need to get back to work soon, but Kevin's planning something for this weekend. He told Brad Peterson that they need to clean house and tie up loose ends before the holidays. What does that mean? I think it means he's planning to eliminate anyone who might be able to testify against him. And I'm probably at the top of that list. Theodore adjusted the small wireless microphone hidden beneath his navy blue polo shirt as he sat in his Mercedes outside Zara's apartment building on West Diversey Parkway. The 3-story brick building was typical of Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood. Well-maintained but affordable, with small front gardens and fire escapes zigzagging up the exterior walls. His phone buzzed with a text. Apartment 2B. Come up. Amelia's excited to meet you. Theodore had spent the afternoon consulting with his corporate attorney and a private security firm, both of whom had advised him to turn everything over to federal authorities immediately. But Zara was right. Without concrete evidence of tonight's illegal delivery, they had nothing but accusations and suspicions. Kevin Murphy was too smart to leave a paper trail, and his connections with local police made the situation even more precarious. Taking a deep breath, Theodore climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. The building smelled like cooking spices and old wood, with hints of someone's laundry detergent drifting from the basement. He could hear muffled television voices, a baby crying somewhere above, and children laughing in one of the apartments. Before he could knock, the door to 2B opened, revealing Zara in dark jeans and a soft burgundy sweater that complemented her skin tone beautifully. She'd pulled her hair back into a loose bun, with a few escaped curls framing her face. Perfect timing, she said, stepping aside to let him enter. Amelia just finished her homework, and I promised her she could stay up 30 minutes past bedtime to meet my friend from work. The apartment was small but immaculately organized, with warm lighting that made the space feel cozy rather than cramped. The living room featured a comfortable-looking burgundy couch with bright yellow throw pillows, a coffee table covered with coloring books and crayons, and walls decorated with Amelia's artwork. A small dining table near the kitchen was set with 3 plates and what appeared to be homemade spaghetti and meatballs. "Mommy!" A small voice called from the kitchen. "Is that your friend? I made extra garlic bread." "Yes, baby. Come meet Mr. Theodore." Amelia Williams was a miniature version of her mother, with the same intelligent dark eyes and expressive face. She wore bright purple leggings, a yellow t-shirt with a smiling T-Rex, and fuzzy dinosaur slippers. Her hair was braided into 2 neat pigtails decorated with colorful elastic bands. "Hi," she said brightly, extending a small hand for Theodore to shake. "I'm Amelia Rodriguez Williams, and I'm 6 3/4 years old. Mommy says you work with her at the restaurant." "That's right," Theodore said, kneeling down to her eye level as he shook her hand solemnly. "It's very nice to meet you, Amelia. I hear you're an expert on dinosaurs." "I am." Amelia's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Do you want to see my dinosaur collection? I have 43 different species, and I can tell you about each one. Amelia, Zara said gently, let's eat dinner first, and then you can show Mr. Theodore your dinosaurs before bedtime. Over dinner, Theodore found himself genuinely charmed by Amelia's endless curiosity and chatter. She told him about her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, her best friend Marcus, who had the same name as her absent father but was much nicer and shares his animal crackers, and her detailed plans for becoming a paleontologist. My mommy says I need to study really hard in school to become a scientist, Amelia explained seriously while twirling spaghetti around her fork. She helps me with my math homework every night, even when she's tired from working. Math is very important for scientists, Theodore agreed. Do you like working with numbers? I love numbers. Watch this. Amelia proceeded to demonstrate her addition and subtraction skills, clearly proud of her abilities. Theodore glanced at Zara, who was watching her daughter with obvious love and pride. The affection between them was palpable, and he could see how Zara's entire world revolved around this bright, energetic little girl. After dinner, Amelia gave Theodore the promised tour of her dinosaur collection, which was impressively organized by time period and geological era. She explained the difference between herbivores and carnivores, demonstrated how paleontologists carefully excavate fossils, and showed him her own fossil dig in a sandbox on the apartment's small back porch. This is very impressive, Amelia, Theodore said honestly. You know more about dinosaurs than most adults I know. Really? Mommy always says I'm smart, but sometimes people don't listen to kids about serious stuff. Well, I think you're brilliant, and I think you're going to make an excellent paleontologist someday. Amelia beamed at the praise, then yawned widely. I'm getting sleepy. But tomorrow is Thursday, which means it's almost Friday, which means it's almost the weekend. Bedtime, little scientist, Zara said, scooping her daughter up for a hug. Say good night to Mr. Theodore. Good night, Mr. Theodore. Will you come visit us again? I want to show you my book about the Mesozoic era next time. I'd love to see it, Theodore said, meaning it completely. As Zara carried Amelia to her bedroom for their nightly routine, Theodore stood alone in the living room, studying the family photos displayed on a narrow bookshelf. Most showed Zara and Amelia at various ages, birthday parties, playground visits, trips to museums and parks. There were a few older photos that appeared to show Zara with her own family, including an elegant older woman who shared her bone structure and regal bearing. That's my grandmother Beatrice, Zara said softly, returning to the living room. The one Amelia wants to name her dinosaur after. She raised you. From the time I was 12. My parents died in a car accident, and Grandma B stepped in to take care of me. She was a secretary at a law firm for 40 years, never made much money, but she made sure I understood that education was the key to building a better life. Is she still alive? She passed away 2 years ago. Lung cancer. Zara's voice was steady, but Theodore could see the lingering grief in her eyes. She never got to see me finish college, never got to see Amelia start school. I think about that a lot. How proud she would have been of Amelia's intelligence and curiosity. I think she would have been proud of you too. Look at what you've built here. A loving home, a brilliant daughter, a life with dignity and purpose despite incredible challenges. Zara settled onto the couch beside him, leaving appropriate space between them but close enough that he could smell her subtle perfume. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, working multiple jobs, trying to give Amelia everything she needs, worrying about money and safety and whether I'm making the right decisions for both of us. Every good parent feels that way sometimes. The fact that you worry about doing right by her proves that you are. And other days, Zara continued, I look at her and think about how resilient and happy she is, despite everything we've been through, and I feel like maybe I'm doing something right after all. You're doing everything right. Amelia is lucky to have you as her mother. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the only sounds coming from Amelia's room, where Zara was apparently reading a bedtime story in different voices for each character. Theodore found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Not the forced relaxation of expensive spa treatments or luxury vacations, but the genuine peace that came from being in a space filled with love and authentic human connection. Theodore, Zara said eventually, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why haven't you ever married? I did some more research today, and every business article mentions that you're one of Chicago's most eligible bachelors, but I couldn't find any information about serious relationships. Theodore considered how much to reveal. I was engaged once. About 7 years ago. Her name was Catherine Preston. Her family owns Preston Development. They build luxury condominiums and commercial properties. What happened? I thought we wanted the same things. A life together, maybe children eventually, building something meaningful. But it turned out that Catherine was more interested in the lifestyle that came with being married to a successful businessman than she was in actually being married to me as a person. How did you find out? I overheard her talking to her sister at a charity gala. She was complaining about how boring I was, how I spent too much time working and not enough time at social events. She said she was considering calling off the engagement unless I agreed to hire a management company to run my restaurants so I could focus on being seen at the right places with the right people. Zara shook her head. She wanted you to give up the work you loved so you could become a full-time accessory to her social ambitions. Exactly. And when I confronted her about it, she didn't deny it. She said that was what wives of successful men were supposed to do, enhance their husband's image and social standing. She couldn't understand why I wanted to spend my evenings reviewing financial reports instead of attending gallery openings and charity auctions. Did you love her? Theodore thought about it carefully. I thought I did. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of her. The idea of having a partner, someone to share my life with. But we never really understood each other on a fundamental level. And since then, I've focused on building my business and convinced myself that I was too busy for serious relationships. It was easier than admitting that I was afraid of making the same mistake again. Choosing someone who looked right on paper but wasn't right for me as a person. Zara was quiet for a moment, processing what he'd shared. What made you realize that Catherine wasn't right for you? Besides overhearing her conversation, I mean. She never once asked me about my work in a way that suggested genuine interest. If I mentioned a new restaurant opening or a staffing challenge, she'd change the subject to something she considered more important. What we were wearing to some event, which vacation house we should rent for the summer, whether we should hire an interior designer for the penthouse. She didn't see your work as part of who you are. Right. And the thing is, my restaurants aren't just my livelihood, they're my legacy. Every location represents dozens of families who depend on those jobs to support their children and pay their mortgages and build their own dreams. Catherine saw all of that as a necessary inconvenience rather than something meaningful. That must have been lonely. It was. I didn't realize how lonely until... Theodore paused, suddenly aware that he was about to say something significant. Until I met someone who understood instinctively that the work itself matters, not just the financial results. Zara met his eyes. Someone who sees the human side of business. Someone who risked her own safety to protect people she works with, even when those people aren't always kind to her. Someone who notices when numbers don't add up and cares enough to investigate. Someone who turns down bribes and threats because she has integrity. Theodore. Someone who raises a brilliant, compassionate daughter while working 3 jobs and still finds time to help her neighbors and dream about making the world better. The space between them on the couch suddenly felt charged with electricity. Theodore could see Zara's pulse beating rapidly at the base of her throat, could hear the slight change in her breathing. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. "When I handed you that note yesterday, it wasn't just because I thought you should know about Kevin's crimes." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'd been watching you for months before I knew who you were. You came in for coffee every few weeks, always sat in the same booth, always polite to the staff even when Kevin was being his usual charming self. You'd bring books to read, and you'd leave generous tips even when the service wasn't great." Theodore was surprised. "I didn't realize you'd noticed me specifically. I noticed everything about you. How you'd say, 'please' and 'thank you' to everyone, including the busboy. How you'd ask about people's families and remember details from previous conversations. How you'd tip extra when you knew someone was having a tough day." "You were paying attention to all that?" "I was attracted to you," Zara said simply. "Long before I knew you were Theodore Blackwood, CEO of anything. I was attracted to the man who treated a tired waitress like she was a human being worthy of respect and kindness." Theodore felt his heart racing. "Why didn't you ever?" "Because I'm a single mother working as a waitress, and you were clearly successful and educated and completely out of my league. Because I've learned to be careful about men who seem too good to be true. And because I was afraid that if I misread the situation, I might lose one of the few jobs that gave me health insurance for Amelia." "You weren't misreading anything," Theodore said quietly. "I looked forward to those coffee visits more than I wanted to admit. I told myself it was because I liked the atmosphere of the restaurant, but really it was because I hoped you'd be working." "Really? Really? You have this way of making everyone around you feel seen and valued. Even when Kevin was being an ass to you, you'd maintain your composure and find ways to make your customers feel welcome. I admired that strength. I thought maybe I was imagining the connection I felt when we'd talk." "You weren't imagining it." They were leaning closer to each other now, the attraction between them undeniable. Theodore could see flecks of gold in Zara's dark eyes, could smell the subtle sweetness of her shampoo. "This is complicated," Zara whispered, echoing his words from that morning. "Very complicated," Theodore agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "But I haven't felt this way about anyone in a very long time." "Neither have I. And after tonight, if everything goes well with gathering evidence against Kevin. After tonight, we'll still need to be careful. There will be investigations, probably a trial. Your safety and Amelia's safety have to come first." "I know. But Theodore, I need you to understand that I'm not looking for someone to rescue me from my life. I'm looking for someone to share my life with. Someone who sees me as an equal partner. That's exactly what I want to offer you. Partnership, not rescue." "Then maybe," Zara said, her voice barely audible, "after we deal with Kevin Murphy and all this criminal nonsense, we can explore what that partnership might look like." "I'd like that very much." Theodore reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't, he gently cupped her face in his hand, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "Zara, His words were interrupted by the sound of Amelia's bedroom door opening. "Mommy, I need some water, and I can't reach the good cups in the kitchen." Zara pulled back quickly, her cheeks flushed. Coming, baby." As she went to help Amelia, Theodore sat back on the couch, his heart still pounding from their near kiss. The domestic interruption had probably been for the best. They needed to keep their focus on tonight's mission, but the moment had confirmed what he'd been feeling since yesterday. This wasn't just attraction or gratitude. This was something real and deep and worth protecting. Zara returned a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Sorry about that. She's usually asleep by now, but I think she's excited about meeting you." "She's wonderful, Zara. You've done an incredible job raising her." "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." They spent the next hour going over their plan for tonight's surveillance operation. Theodore would park across the street from the restaurant at 10:30 p.m., positioning himself with a clear view of the loading dock. Zara would stay inside during her closing shift, gathering any additional evidence she could find and sending him text updates about Kevin's activities. "What if something goes wrong?" Theodore asked. "What if Kevin suspects you're involved? Then I'll deny everything and claim I was just doing my job." "But Theodore, if something does go wrong, if Kevin threatens me or if things get dangerous, I need you to promise me something." "Anything. Promise me you'll call the police immediately, even if it means our evidence isn't perfect. My safety and Amelia's safety are more important than getting a perfect case against Kevin Murphy." "I promise. But Zara, I don't want you taking any unnecessary risks tonight. If Kevin asks you to work late or go into the storage areas, find an excuse to stay in the dining room with other people around." "I will. But I also need you to promise that if this goes badly, if I get arrested or if Kevin somehow turns this around on us, you'll make sure Amelia is taken care of. My neighbor Mrs. Patterson has agreed to keep her temporarily if something happens to me, but I need to know that someone with resources will be looking out for her long-term interests." Theodore felt a chill at the thought of anything happening to Zara. "Nothing's going to happen to you. We're going to expose Kevin's crimes, get him arrested, and then we're going to build a life together. All 3 of us. All 3 of us? You, me, and Amelia. I know it's fast, and I know we need to take things slowly for her sake, but Zara, I can already see how we could be a family." Tears gathered in Zara's eyes. "I've been afraid to even think about that possibility." "Why?" "Because Amelia's already had one man walk out of her life. I can't risk letting her get attached to someone who might leave when things get difficult or complicated." "I'm not going anywhere," Theodore said firmly. "Whatever happens tonight, whatever happens with the investigation, whatever challenges we face building a relationship, I'm in this for the long term. I want to be the kind of man who shows up, who keeps his promises, who puts family first." "Do you mean that?" "I've never meant anything more in my life." At 9:45 p.m., Theodore prepared to leave for his surveillance position. As he was putting on his jacket, Zara caught his hand. "Theodore, before you go, I need to say something." "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you," she said quietly. "I know it's too soon and probably crazy given everything that's happening, but I needed you to know before tonight." Theodore felt his chest expand with warmth and joy. "I'm falling in love with you too. And tomorrow, when Kevin Murphy is in police custody and we don't have to worry about danger anymore, I'm going to kiss you properly." "I'll hold you to that promise." "You'd better." As Theodore headed for the door, both of them knew that the next few hours would determine not just the outcome of their investigation, but the future of their relationship and Amelia's safety. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had their commitment to each other. Theodore parked his Mercedes across from O'Malley's Diner on North Clark Street, choosing a spot between 2 larger vehicles that would help camouflage his presence. The October night was crisp, with a sharp wind cutting through the empty streets of Lincoln Park. Most of the neighboring businesses had closed hours ago, leaving only the warm glow from the diner's windows and the occasional flash of headlights from passing cars. He adjusted the small recording device clipped inside his jacket and tested the camera app on his phone one more time. Everything needed to work perfectly tonight. They might not get another chance to catch Kevin Murphy in the act. Through the diner's large front windows, Theodore could see Zara moving efficiently between tables, clearing dishes and wiping down surfaces. Two other servers were working the closing shift. Janet, a heavy-set woman in her 50s who'd been with the company for 8 years, and Danny, a college student who worked nights to pay for his engineering classes at Northwestern. Theodore's phone buzzed with a text from Zara. Kevin just arrived. Acting nervous. Keeps checking his watch and looking toward the loading dock. Something's definitely happening tonight. He replied, Stay visible. Don't go anywhere alone with him. Understood. We'll keep you updated. At 10:47 p.m., a dark blue panel van pulled into the alley behind the restaurant, parking directly beside the loading dock. Theodore couldn't see the license plate from his position, but he started recording video as two men in black hoodies got out of the van and approached the restaurant's back entrance. His phone buzzed again. Two men just came in through the back. Kevin sent Danny home early and told Janet to finish cleaning the front dining room. He's taking me to the storage area to help with inventory. This is it. Theodore's blood ran cold. No, don't go back there alone with him. Make an excuse. Stay in the dining room. If I don't go, he'll know something's wrong. I can handle this. Just be ready to call 911 if I don't text you back in 15 minutes. Zara, please. But she didn't respond to his follow-up texts. Through the restaurant windows, Theodore watched Janet methodically cleaning tables, unaware of what was happening in the back of the building. The front dining room looked normal, peaceful even, but Theodore's instincts were screaming that everything was about to go wrong. 12 minutes passed without any communication from Zara. Theodore was reaching for his phone to call 911 when movement in the alley caught his attention. The two men from the van were wheeling out industrial-sized containers on dollies, the kind used for restaurant supply deliveries. But these containers were leaving the restaurant, not entering it. He zoomed in with his phone camera, trying to capture clear footage of the men's faces and the van's license plate. The image quality wasn't perfect, but it might be enough for investigators to identify the individuals involved. 15 minutes. Still no word from Zara. Theodore was about to dial 911 when his phone finally buzzed with a message. But it wasn't from Zara's number. Mr. Blackwood, this is Kevin Murphy. I believe you've been looking for me. Theodore's hands went numb. How did Kevin get his personal cell phone number? How did Kevin even know he was here? Another message arrived. Oh, did I surprise you? You're not as clever as you think you are. Did you really believe that nobody would recognize the famous Theodore Blackwood, even in your cute little disguise? Theodore's mind raced. Someone at the restaurant had identified him and reported back to Kevin. But who? And when? Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to drive away from here and forget everything you think you saw tonight. You're going to fire Zara Williams for theft and insubordination, and you're going to pretend this conversation never happened. And if I don't? The response came immediately. Then your new girlfriend and her precious little daughter are going to have a very unfortunate accident. Accidents happen all the time in this neighborhood. Break-ins, car crashes, gas leaks. Such a shame when hard-working single mothers get caught up in dangerous situations. Theodore felt rage building in his chest. If you hurt them, you'll what? Call the police? Go ahead. Tell them about your wild theories. Tell them about imaginary criminal conspiracies. By the time they finish laughing at you, Zara and Amelia will be just another tragic news story. What do you want? I want you to understand that you're not in control here. I know about your little surveillance mission tonight. I know about the recording equipment you're wearing. I know about your plan to expose me to the authorities. How could Kevin possibly know about the recording equipment? Theodore had been careful to hide it, and only Zara knew about their plan. Unless. That's right, Mr. Blackwood. You're starting to understand. Your precious Zara has been working with me from the beginning. Theodore's world tilted. That's not possible, isn't it? Think about it carefully. How convenient that she recognized you so quickly. How perfectly she played the role of the concerned employee trying to help. How easily she gained your trust and learned about your investigation. You're lying. Am I? Who else knew about your recording equipment tonight? Who else knew exactly when and where you'd be conducting surveillance? Who else had access to your personal information and daily routine? Theodore felt sick. But it couldn't be true. Zara's concern for her daughter was genuine. Her fear when talking about Kevin's threats was real. The connection between them, the love growing between them, that couldn't all be fake. Still don't believe me? Check your email. With trembling hands, Theodore opened his email app. A new message had arrived from an address he didn't recognize, with the subject line, Evidence. The email contained a series of photographs that made Theodore's blood turn to ice. Photos of him entering and leaving Zara's apartment building. Photos of him playing with Amelia in the small backyard. Photos of him and Zara sitting close together on the couch, clearly taken through the apartment window. But the most damaging photo showed Zara shaking hands with Kevin Murphy in the restaurant's parking lot, both of them smiling. The timestamp indicated the photo had been taken that afternoon, after Theodore had left the restaurant. She's been reporting your every move to me since Sunday. Every conversation, every plan, every moment of vulnerability you've shared with her. Did you really think a woman like that could fall in love with a man like you so quickly? Without ulterior motives? Theodore stared at the photos, his mind reeling. The image of Zara shaking hands with Kevin was devastating, but something about it felt wrong. Her body language seemed tense, not friendly, and the angle of the photo made it impossible to see their full interaction. Don't feel bad, Mr. Blackwood. Zara is very good at what she does. The helpless single mother act, the bright child who needs protecting, the vulnerable woman looking for love. She's played these roles before. Did you know she's never actually worked at any of my other restaurant locations? Did you know her previous employment history includes a very interesting gap of 2 years? What are you saying? I'm saying that Zara Williams is a professional con artist who specializes in targeting wealthy, lonely men. And you, Mr. Blackwood, were the perfect mark. Theodore felt like he was drowning. Everything Kevin was saying contradicted what he felt in his heart about Zara, but the evidence was right there in front of him. The photos, the convenient timing of her approach, the way she'd gained his trust so quickly. Still there, Mr. Blackwood? Or are you starting to realize how thoroughly you've been played? Where is she now? Safe and sound, collecting her payment for a job well done. But don't worry, she's not heartless. She did say she felt a little bad about using your obvious loneliness against you. Apparently, you're a better man than most of her usual targets. Theodore closed his eyes, trying to think clearly through the pain and confusion. But before he could process everything, another message arrived. "Oh, and Mr. Blackwood? Those federal investigators you contacted this afternoon? The ones you asked to look into my business operations? They received an anonymous tip tonight about a certain CEO who's been embezzling from his own restaurants and framing innocent employees to cover his tracks." "What?" Zara provided them with very convincing evidence of your financial crimes. Bank records, forged documents, witness statements from concerned employees. By tomorrow morning, you'll be the one under federal investigation. Theodore's hands were shaking so violently he could barely type. "This is insane. None of that is true. Truth is relative, Mr. Blackwood. And right now, the truth is that you're a corrupt businessman who got caught stealing from his own company. The truth is that you tried to seduce and manipulate an innocent employee to help you cover up your crimes. The truth is that when she refused to participate in your criminal conspiracy, you threatened her and her child. No one will believe that, won't they?" Lonely billionaire, vulnerable single mother, threats and coercion. It's a very believable story. Especially when it's supported by audio recordings of your conversations, financial documents with your forged signature, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Theodore realized with growing horror that Kevin had been planning this trap for much longer than just tonight. This wasn't a simple theft operation. This was an elaborate scheme to destroy him completely. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear. Leave Chicago tonight. Transfer control of your restaurant empire to my designated management company. Sign the papers my lawyers will deliver to you tomorrow morning, and vanish from our lives permanently." "And if I refuse?" "Then federal agents will arrest you tomorrow afternoon for embezzlement, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. You'll spend the next 10 years in prison while I run your restaurants into the ground. And Zara and Amelia will continue to be in danger from your criminal associates who are unhappy about your cooperation with federal investigators." Theodore felt trapped, suffocated by the web of lies and manipulation Kevin had constructed. But one thing still didn't make sense. If Zara was working with you from the beginning, why didn't you just have her feed me false information about the thefts? Why involve federal investigators at all? Because, Mr. Blackwood, this was never about the petty theft operation. This was about taking everything you've built and making it mine. Your restaurants, your reputation, your freedom, everything. The theft was just bait to draw you into a much larger trap. How long have you been planning this? Since the day you inherited Daddy's little business empire and decided you were smarter than everyone else. Did you really think you could build a billion-dollar company without making enemies? Did you think nobody would notice how easy it would be to destroy a man who has no family, no close friends, and a pathological need to rescue people in distress? The cruelty in Kevin's messages was breathtaking. But Theodore forced himself to focus on the inconsistencies in the story. Kevin claimed Zara was a professional con artist, but Theodore had seen the genuine love between her and Amelia. He'd witnessed her authentic fear when discussing Kevin's threats. He'd felt the real connection between them when they'd almost kissed earlier that evening. "You're lying about Zara." "Am I?" "Then where is she right now? Why isn't she answering your texts? Why hasn't she tried to warn you that your position has been compromised?" Theodore's phone showed that his last 3 messages to Zara remained unread. It had been over 30 minutes since her last communication. Maybe she can't respond because you're holding her against her will. Or maybe she's busy celebrating the successful completion of her assignment. Mr. Blackwood, I'm going to give you one final chance to accept reality. Zara Williams played you perfectly. She identified your psychological vulnerabilities, crafted a persona designed to appeal to your hero complex, and manipulated you into trusting her completely. It was a masterful performance, and you fell for every moment of it. I don't believe you. Then prove me wrong. Drive to her apartment right now. See if she's there. See if she's alone. See if she welcomes you with the same warmth she showed you earlier tonight. Fine. I will. Excellent. But Mr. Blackwood, when you discover that apartment 2B is empty, that the lease was signed under a false name, and that your precious Zara has vanished without a trace, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember how easily you were manipulated by a woman who saw you as nothing more than a profitable target. Theodore started his car with shaking hands, his heart hammering against his ribs. Kevin had to be lying. There was no way Zara's feelings for him were fake, no way her love for Amelia was an act, no way their entire connection had been a calculated deception. But as he drove toward West Diversey Parkway, doubt crept into his mind like poison. Zara had recognized him remarkably quickly. She had approached him with that note at exactly the right moment. She had gained his trust with suspicious ease. And now she wasn't responding to his messages. The three-story brick building looked exactly as it had when he'd left earlier that evening, but Theodore noticed that the lights in apartment 2B were off. At nearly midnight, that wasn't necessarily unusual. Amelia would be asleep, and Zara might be as well if she'd returned from the restaurant. But something felt wrong. Theodore climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The building was silent except for the distant hum of a refrigerator and the muffled sound of a television from one of the other apartments. He knocked softly on the door to 2B, not wanting to wake Amelia if she was sleeping. No response. He knocked again, slightly louder. Still nothing. Theodore tried calling Zara's phone, listening for the sound of ringing from inside the apartment. But he heard only silence. Fighting down panic, he tried the door handle. To his shock, it turned easily. The door was unlocked. Zara! He called softly as he stepped inside. It's Theodore. Are you here? The apartment was dark and eerily quiet. Theodore fumbled for the light switch, and when the lights came on, his world collapsed completely. The apartment was empty, not just of people, but of everything. The comfortable burgundy couch was gone. The coffee table covered with Amelia's coloring books had vanished. The dining table where they'd shared spaghetti and conversation was nowhere to be seen. The walls that had been covered with Amelia's artwork were bare, showing only the faint outlines where frames had once hung. The bookshelf with family photos had disappeared, along with every trace of the life Theodore had witnessed just hours earlier. He stumbled through the empty rooms in a daze. The kitchen contained nothing but basic appliances. Amelia's bedroom, where he'd admired her dinosaur collection, was completely vacant. No furniture, no toys, no sign that a bright 6-year-old had ever lived there. In what had been Zara's bedroom, Theodore found only a single piece of paper lying on the bare floor. With numb fingers, he picked it up and read the handwritten note. Mr. Blackwood, by the time you read this, you'll understand that everything you believed about me was a carefully constructed lie. I'm sorry it had to end this way, but business is business. The woman you thought you were falling in love with never existed. Z. Theodore sank to the floor, the note trembling in his hands. The handwriting was definitely Zara's. He recognized it from the original note she'd slipped him under his coffee cup. But the coldness of the message was like a knife through his chest. His phone buzzed with a final message from Kevin. Now you understand. Zara and Amelia are long gone, Mr. Blackwood. You'll never see them again. My lawyers will contact you in the morning with the transfer documents. Sign them, disappear, and this nightmare ends. Refuse, and I'll destroy what's left of your life and reputation. Federal agents will be at your penthouse at 8 a.m. tomorrow to arrest you for embezzlement and fraud. Unless, of course, you're somewhere else by then. Somewhere far away, where extradition might prove difficult. Theodore stared at his phone, unable to process the magnitude of his betrayal and loss. In less than 72 hours, he'd gone from being a successful businessman investigating minor theft to being a heartbroken fugitive facing federal charges. But the worst part wasn't the destruction of his career or the threat of imprisonment. The worst part was the devastating realization that the woman he'd fallen in love with, the connection he'd felt, the future he'd imagined, the family he'd dreamed of building, had all been an elaborate fiction designed to destroy him. He thought about Amelia's bright curiosity, her dinosaur collection, her excitement about becoming a paleontologist. Had that brilliant little girl been an actress? Had her affection for him been scripted? Had her bedtime routine, her innocent questions, her shy goodbye hugs all been part of an elaborate performance? The thought made him physically ill. Theodore stumbled out of the empty apartment and down the stairs, feeling like he was moving through a nightmare. Everything he believed about love, trust, and human connection had been shattered in the space of an hour. As he sat in his car outside the building where he'd experienced the happiest evening of his adult life, Theodore faced the most devastating choice of his life. Flee Chicago and abandon everything he'd built, or stay and fight charges he couldn't prove were false with evidence that had been fabricated by professionals. Either way, he would never see Zara Williams again. Either way, the woman he'd fallen in love with had never actually existed. But as Theodore sat in the darkness, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a question that refused to be silenced. If Zara had been conning him from the beginning, why had she looked so genuinely terrified when Kevin's name was mentioned? And why had her love for Amelia seemed so authentic and unguarded? Maybe Kevin was telling the truth. Maybe Theodore had been the perfect mark, and everything he'd felt was just wishful thinking. Or maybe this was exactly what Kevin wanted him to believe. Theodore sat in his Mercedes outside the empty apartment building for nearly an hour, staring at the darkened windows of 2B and trying to make sense of the wreckage of his life. The October wind rattled the car windows, and the street was empty except for a few parked cars and the occasional taxi heading toward Lincoln Park. His phone had been silent since Kevin's final threatening message, but Theodore's mind was anything but quiet. Every moment he'd shared with Zara replayed in excruciating detail. Her nervous laughter when she'd first approached him, the way her hands had trembled when she'd talked about Kevin's threats, the genuine pride in her voice when she'd spoken about Amelia's intelligence. Had all of it been performance? Theodore started the engine and drove aimlessly through the empty Chicago streets, past the late-night diners and 24-hour convenience stores that served the city's insomniacs and night-shift workers. He found himself heading toward the lakefront, drawn by the need for space and clarity that only the vast expanse of Lake Michigan could provide. He parked at North Avenue Beach and walked out onto the pier, the cold wind cutting through his jacket. The lake stretched endlessly before him, dark water meeting darker sky at an invisible horizon. The city lights reflected on the waves like scattered diamonds, beautiful and distant. This is where it ends, Theodore thought. Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, destroyed by my own stupidity and loneliness. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Blackwood, this is Attorney Patricia Henley. Mr. Murphy has retained my services to handle your asset transfer documents. I'll be at your building at 7 a.m. tomorrow with the paperwork. Please be available to sign, or my client will proceed with alternative measures. Theodore deleted the message without responding. 7 hours until his world officially ended. 7 hours to decide whether to run or stay and fight a battle he couldn't win. He thought about his father, William Blackwood, who had built their first restaurant from nothing in 1987. William had been a good man, honest, hard-working, devoted to treating his employees fairly and his customers well. He would be ashamed to see what his son had allowed their legacy to become. But what if Kevin is lying about everything? The thought came unbidden, cutting through Theodore's despair like a lighthouse beam through fog. What if the elaborate deception wasn't Zara's con job, but Kevin's masterpiece? Theodore pulled out his phone and opened the photos Kevin had sent him. He studied each image carefully, looking for details he'd missed in his initial shock. The timestamp on the photo of Zara shaking hands with Kevin was from that afternoon, but something about it still bothered him. He zoomed in on Zara's face. Even in the grainy photo, her expression didn't look friendly or conspiratorial. Her smile seemed forced, her posture tense. And was that a bruise on her left temple, partially hidden by her hair? Theodore's heart began to race. What if that photo didn't show Zara accepting payment for a job well done? What if it showed her being threatened, coerced, or worse? He scrolled back through his text conversation with Zara from earlier that evening, reading her messages with new eyes. Kevin just arrived. Acting nervous. Keeps checking his watch and looking toward the loading dock. Something's definitely happening tonight. 2 men just came in through the back. Kevin sent Danny home early and told Janet to finish cleaning the front dining room. He's taking me to the storage area to help with inventory. This is it. If I don't go, he'll know something's wrong. I can handle this. Just be ready to call 911 if I don't text you back in 15 minutes. Theodore's blood ran cold. Zara had been afraid, but she'd gone with Kevin anyway because she didn't want to blow their investigation. She'd risked her safety to help him, and he'd been sitting in his car while Kevin what? What had happened to her in that storage room? Theodore's hands shook as he speed-dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a missing person. A woman named Zara Williams was last seen at O'Malley's Diner on North Clark Street around 11 p.m. tonight. She may be in danger. Sir, can you describe the nature of the danger? She was investigating criminal activity at the restaurant, and the manager threatened her. She stopped responding to texts, and her apartment has been completely emptied out. How long has she been missing? Theodore checked his phone. Almost 2 hours since her last message. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't file a missing person report until someone has been gone for at least 24 hours, unless there's evidence of foul play. Has anyone witnessed a crime or found signs of violence? No, but I'd suggest contacting the person's family members or friends to see if they know where she might be. If she's still missing tomorrow night, call us back. The line went dead. Theodore stared at his phone in frustration. The police couldn't help him, and he had no way to contact Zara's family or friends. Hell, he didn't even know if Amelia was her real daughter or if any of their story was true. But his gut told him Zara was in danger. Real, immediate danger. Theodore got back in his car and drove toward O'Malley's Diner, his mind racing. If Kevin had been planning this elaborate frame job for months, he would have needed time to set everything up. The forged financial documents, the fake evidence, the coordinated timing with federal investigators. None of that could have been arranged in a single evening. Which meant Kevin had known Theodore was coming to Chicago before Theodore had made the decision himself. How is that possible? Theodore thought back to Sunday morning, when he'd first decided to investigate the Chicago location personally. He'd made that decision alone in his Manhattan penthouse, hadn't discussed it with anyone, hadn't even told his assistant until Monday morning. Unless Theodore pulled over and called his assistant, Jennifer Martinez, despite the late hour. "Mr. Blackwood? Is everything all right? It's almost 1 a.m. Jennifer, I need you to check something for me. Last weekend, did anyone call asking about my schedule or travel plans?" "Well, yes, actually. On Saturday afternoon, someone from the Chicago restaurant called asking about your availability for a surprise inspection. They said they were planning improvements and wanted to make sure you wouldn't be visiting unexpectedly." "Who called?" The caller said he was the assistant manager. Kevin something? He seemed very concerned about making a good impression. Theodore's heart sank. Kevin had known he was coming before Theodore had even decided to make the trip. The entire scenario, from Zara's perfectly timed approach to the investigation that followed, had been orchestrated from the beginning. "Jennifer, one more question. Did you tell this Kevin person when I would be arriving in Chicago?" "I told him you hadn't scheduled anything yet, but I mentioned that you typically do surprise visits on Monday mornings when you travel." "Why? Did I do something wrong?" "No, you did exactly what you were supposed to do." "Thank you." Theodore hung up and sat in his car, pieces of the puzzle finally coming together. Kevin had known he was coming and had prepared accordingly. But that still didn't answer the most important question. Was Zara an accomplice or a victim? He drove back to O'Malley's diner, parking in the same spot he'd used for surveillance earlier. The restaurant was dark now, closed for the night, but Theodore could see light coming from the office windows on the second floor. Someone was still in the building. Theodore circled the block and parked in the alley behind the restaurant, near the loading dock where he'd seen the suspicious van earlier. The van was gone, but the loading dock door was slightly ajar. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Theodore got out of his car and approached the building. He could hear voices coming from somewhere inside, muffled conversation that he couldn't quite make out. The loading dock door opened into a storage area filled with restaurant supplies. Cases of canned goods, bags of flour and sugar, industrial-sized containers of cooking oil. Theodore moved carefully between the stacks of inventory, following the sound of voices toward the front of the building. "Told you to keep her quiet, not knock her unconscious," a man's voice was saying. Theodore recognized Kevin Murphy's cold tone. "She was fighting too much," another voice replied. "Scratched the hell out of my arms. Had to calm her down." "Well, wake her up. We need her conscious for the phone call." Theodore's blood turned to ice. They had Zara, and she was hurt. He crept closer to the source of the voices, staying hidden behind a tall rack of supplies. Through a gap between boxes, he could see into the restaurant's office area. Kevin was there with two other men, the same ones Theodore had seen loading containers into the van. And tied to a chair in the center of the room, her head slumped forward and her dark hair hiding her face, was Zara. Theodore had never felt rage like this before. Pure, white-hot fury that made his vision blur and his hands shake. These men had hurt the woman he loved, had terrorized her, had used her as a pawn in their twisted game. But 3 against 1 were not good odds, especially when the 3 had guns visible in their waistbands. Theodore needed help, but the police had already dismissed his concerns, and he had no proof of what was happening. His phone. He could record everything, gather evidence, then call 911 with concrete proof of a crime in progress. Theodore activated his phone's camera and started recording, zooming in on the scene in the office. One of Kevin's accomplices was trying to wake Zara by roughly shaking her shoulders. "Come on, sweetheart. Time to make a phone call to your boyfriend." Zara's head lifted slowly, and Theodore's heart broke when he saw her face. Her left eye was swollen shut, there was dried blood on her lip, and finger-shaped bruises were visible on her throat. But her right eye blazed with defiance even in her injured state. "Go to hell," she said clearly. Kevin stepped closer to her chair. Now, Zara. Is that any way to talk to someone who's offering you a very generous business proposition? I already told you, I'm not calling him. I'm not reading your script. And I'm not helping you destroy an innocent man. One of the other men backhanded her across the face, snapping her head to the side. Theodore had to bite his own hand to keep from crying out. That innocent man is worth more than you'll ever see in 10 lifetimes, Kevin said conversationally. And all we're asking you to do is make one little phone call. Tell him you're safe. Tell him you're sorry for lying to him. Tell him you're leaving Chicago forever. Simple. And if I refuse, then your daughter really will be in danger. Right now, Amelia is safe at her grandmother's house in Milwaukee, completely unaware that Mommy is having a difficult evening. But that could change very quickly if you don't cooperate. Theodore's heart lurched. Amelia was real. Zara's love for her daughter was genuine, which meant everything else, her fear, her courage, her feelings for him, might be real too. You bastard, Zara whispered. She's just a child who needs her mother to make smart choices. Now, are you going to make that phone call, or do I need to send my friends to Milwaukee tonight? Theodore watched Zara's face crumple as she weighed an impossible choice. Betray the man she'd fallen in love with, or risk her daughter's safety. What exactly do you want me to say? Simple. You're going to tell Theodore that you've been lying to him from the beginning. You're going to tell him that you were paid to seduce him and gather information about his business operations. You're going to tell him that you never cared about him and that he was just another mark in a long line of wealthy men you've conned. He'll never believe that. Oh, but he will. Because you're going to be very convincing. You're going to break his heart so thoroughly that he'll never question your story. And then you're going to disappear forever. Theodore realized with crystal clarity that this was Kevin's endgame. He didn't just want Theodore's restaurants. He wanted to destroy Theodore completely. To break his spirit, crush his ability to trust, and leave him so emotionally devastated that he'd never recover enough to fight back. But Kevin had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how much Zara cared about Theodore. I won't do it, Zara said firmly. I won't destroy him for you. Even if it means your daughter's life? Amelia is strong and smart, just like her mother. She'll survive whatever you do to us. But I won't be able to live with myself if I betray the first good man I've ever met. Theodore's heart soared even as he watched Kevin's face darken with anger. Then you've made your choice. Marcus, call our friends in Milwaukee. Tell them it's time for the little girl to have an accident. One of the men pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, Theodore made his own choice. He stepped out from behind the supply rack, his phone held high and recording. I wouldn't make that call if I were you. 3 guns were pointed at him instantly, but Theodore kept his phone raised. I've been recording everything for the past 10 minutes. Video and audio of you threatening Zara and her daughter, clear footage of you holding her against her will, evidence of your entire criminal conspiracy. That recording is automatically uploading to cloud storage as we speak. Kevin's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Am I? Marcus, is it? Why don't you explain to the camera how you helped embezzle money from my restaurants? Or would you prefer to discuss your plans to harm a 6-year-old child? Marcus lowered his phone without making the call. Here's what's going to happen, Theodore continued, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. You're going to untie Zara right now. You're going to let both of us walk out of here unharmed. And then you're going to turn yourselves in to the federal investigators who are probably already on their way here. Federal investigators? Kevin laughed harshly. The only federal investigators involved in this case are the ones who are going to arrest you tomorrow morning for embezzlement. Actually, Kevin, that's where you're wrong. Theodore smiled grimly. See, I never contacted federal investigators this week. I was planning to handle this situation through local law enforcement and internal corporate security. The federal investigation you're referring to? That was your mistake, not mine. Kevin's confident expression faltered slightly. When you told me that federal agents would be arresting me tomorrow, you revealed that you'd initiated that investigation yourself. Which means you've been planning this frame job for much longer than a few days. Which means there's a paper trail of your criminal conspiracy going back weeks or months. Theodore saw understanding dawn in Kevin's eyes, followed quickly by panic. But here's the really beautiful part, Kevin. When I realized what you were doing, I contacted the real federal investigators. Agent Patricia Chen from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is very interested in your elaborate embezzlement and fraud scheme. She's also very interested in your kidnapping and extortion charges. You're lying. Am I? Agent Chen, would you like to introduce yourself? Theodore had been bluffing about the federal agents, but his gamble paid off when Kevin and his accomplices spun around toward the loading dock entrance, giving Theodore the distraction he needed. He lunged forward and grabbed the gun from the nearest man's waistband, shouting, "FBI! Everyone on the ground!" in the most authoritative voice he could muster. In the confusion that followed, Theodore managed to untie Zara's hands while keeping the gun pointed at Kevin and his men. Zara was weak and disoriented, but she was conscious and able to stand with his help. "Can you walk?" he whispered to her. "I think so. Amelia. We'll get her back. I promise." Theodore kept the gun trained on the three men while he and Zara backed toward the loading dock. "Don't move until we're gone. And Kevin, those federal agents I mentioned, they really are on their way. I called them from my car 20 minutes ago." It was another bluff, but a convincing one. Theodore and Zara made it to his car without pursuit, and Theodore immediately called 911 with a very different story than his earlier attempt. 911, what's your emergency? This is Theodore Blackwood. I'm reporting a kidnapping and assault at O'Malley's Diner, 847 North Clark Street. 3 armed men are holding the restaurant manager hostage and have threatened to harm a child. We need police and paramedics immediately. As they drove away from the restaurant, Theodore reached over and gently took Zara's hand. "Are you okay?" She squeezed his fingers weakly. "I thought you believed Kevin's lies about me. The empty apartment, the fake evidence. I thought you'd given up on us." "Never," Theodore said firmly. "I may have doubted for a few minutes, but my heart knew the truth. What you and I have is real, Zara. What happened between us this week, that wasn't acting or manipulation. That was 2 people finding each other when they needed it most." "But how did you know to look for me at the restaurant?" "Because I know you. The woman who would slip a note to a stranger to protect other employees, who would risk her safety to expose corruption, who would refuse to betray someone she cared about even under threat of death. That woman doesn't just disappear without a trace. That woman fights." Tears ran down Zara's bruised face. "I was so scared, Theodore. Not just for myself, but for Amelia. And for you. Kevin's been planning this for months, gathering fake evidence, building his case against you. Even if we expose him now, there might still be federal charges. Let me worry about that. Right now, we need to get you to a hospital and make sure Amelia is safe. As they drove through the early morning streets of Chicago, Theodore realized that the choice he'd made wasn't just about believing in Zara's innocence. It was about choosing to believe in love itself, to trust that genuine connection and shared values could overcome even the most elaborate deception. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt hope. The first rays of dawn painted the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and amber as Theodore sat beside Zara's hospital bed, watching her sleep. The doctors at Northwestern Memorial had treated her injuries, a mild concussion, bruised ribs, and multiple contusions, but had insisted on keeping her for observation overnight. Theodore hadn't left her side. He held her hand gently, careful not to disturb the four-line, and marveled at how peaceful she looked despite everything she'd endured. The swelling around her left eye had gone down slightly, and the bruises on her throat were already beginning to fade from angry purple to yellowish green. His phone buzzed with a text from FBI agent Patricia Chen, Kevin Murphy and associates in custody. All charges dropped against you. Need to debrief when Ms. Williams is feeling better. Excellent work, Mr. Blackwood. Theodore smiled and typed back, "Thank you, Agent Chen. Zara should be released this morning. We'll be available whenever you need us." The real Agent Chen had arrived at O'Malley's Diner 40 minutes after Theodore's 911 call, along with a team of federal investigators and Chicago PD. It turned out that the FBI had been building a case against Kevin Murphy for months, tracking his embezzlement activities across multiple restaurant chains. Theodore's evidence had been the final piece they needed to make arrests. But the most important victory had come 3 hours ago, when Milwaukee police confirmed that Amelia Williams was safe at her grandmother's house, completely unaware of the danger her mother had faced. Kevin's threats against the little girl had been empty intimidation tactics. He'd never actually sent anyone to Milwaukee. Zara stirred in the hospital bed, her right eye fluttering open. "Theodore, I'm here," he said softly, squeezing her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck driven by Kevin Murphy." She tried to smile, then winced as the motion pulled at her split lip. "Please tell me this isn't all a dream and that bastard is really in jail." FBI custody, along with his 2 accomplices. Agent Chen says they found enough evidence to put Kevin away for 15 to 20 years. And Amelia? Safe and sound in Milwaukee. I spoke to your mother an hour ago. She's bringing Amelia to Chicago this afternoon. Zara's eye filled with tears of relief. "Thank you. For believing in me, for saving me, for everything." Theodore leaned forward and gently kissed her forehead. "Thank you for being brave enough to slip me that note in the first place. Without your courage, Kevin would have destroyed dozens of people's lives." "What happens now? To your restaurants, I mean. Kevin did so much damage." "The restaurants will recover. My accountants are already working with federal investigators to trace every dollar Kevin stole. The employees who were threatened or intimidated will receive compensation and counseling. And I'm implementing new oversight procedures to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." "And what about us?" Zara asked quietly. "When all this chaos settles down, when you go back to your penthouse in Manhattan and I go back to waiting tables." "Actually, I've been thinking about that." Theodore reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know this might seem fast, and I know we've only known each other for a week, but..." "Theodore, What are you doing?" He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I'm asking you to marry me, Zara Williams. I'm asking you to be my partner in life and in business. I'm asking you to help me rebuild not just my restaurants, but my entire understanding of what it means to create something meaningful." Zara stared at the ring, then at Theodore's face. "Are you serious? After everything that's happened, all the lies and deception and danger, you want to get married?" "Because of everything that's happened. Because when the whole world seemed to be falling apart, you were the one thing I could count on. Because your courage and integrity showed me what I've been missing in my life. Because I love you, Zara, and I can't imagine facing another day without you. But I'm nobody special, Theodore. I'm a single mother with a GED and a history of bad choices. Your world, your friends, your business associates will learn to love you just like I do. And if they don't, then they're not the kind of people I want in my life anyway." Theodore took the ring from the box and held it out to her. "I'm not asking you to become someone different, Zara. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, but to be it with me. Forever." Zara looked at the ring for a long moment, then met his eyes. "What about Amelia? She's been through so much change already, and now, I love Amelia too. From the moment I met her, I could see where you get your strength and intelligence. I want to be her stepfather, Zara. I want to give her every opportunity in the world, but more than that, I want to be the kind of man she can look up to." "Theodore." Zara's voice was soft with wonder. "Are you sure? Really, truly sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Zara held out her left hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Then yes. Yes, I'll marry you, Theodore Blackwood." Theodore slipped the ring onto her finger, and even in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the hospital room, it sparkled like captured starlight. He leaned down and kissed her gently, careful of her injuries, pouring all his love and promise for their future into that simple touch. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Chen entered, followed by a small whirlwind of energy in a bright pink jacket and purple sneakers. "Mommy!" Amelia Williams launched herself at the hospital bed, and Zara caught her daughter in a fierce hug despite her sore ribs. "Baby girl, I missed you so much. Are you okay? Did you have fun with Grandma Ruth?" "I'm fine, but Grandma said you were sick and had to stay in the hospital. What happened to your face?" Zara glanced at Theodore, who nodded encouragingly. "Mommy had an accident at work, sweetheart. But I'm going to be fine, and some very nice police officers made sure the people who caused the accident can't hurt anyone else." Amelia studied her mother's bruised face with the serious expression of a 6-year-old trying to understand adult complexities. Then she turned to Theodore with the same intensity. "Are you the nice man who helped my mommy?" "I am. And your mommy helped me too. We helped each other." "Good. Mommy deserves someone who helps her." Amelia climbed onto the hospital bed and snuggled against Zara's uninjured side. "Grandma Ruth says you're rich and you have lots of restaurants." "That's right. Do you have mac and cheese at your restaurants?" Theodore laughed. "The best mac and cheese in Chicago. Would you like to try some sometime?" "Can I have it for lunch?" "Amelia," Zara started to correct her daughter's boldness, but Theodore held up a hand. "Actually, I think mac and cheese for lunch sounds perfect. But first, I have something important to ask you." He knelt beside the hospital bed so he was at Amelia's eye level. "Amelia, your mommy and I have fallen in love, and I've asked her to marry me. She said yes. Amelia's eyes went wide. You're going to be my new daddy? If that's okay with you. I know you already have a daddy somewhere, and I'm not trying to replace him. But I would love to be part of your family, if you'll have me. Amelia looked back and forth between Theodore and her mother, processing this momentous information. Will we get to live in a big house? A very big house, Theodore confirmed. With your own room and a yard to play in and anything else you want. Can I have a dog? Zara started to protest, but Theodore nodded solemnly. I think every little girl should have a dog. What kind would you like? A golden retriever, like the one in the movie. Then a golden retriever it is. Amelia threw her arms around Theodore's neck with the uninhibited affection that only children possess. I like you, Mr. Theodore. You make my mommy smile, and you promise good things. Theodore hugged her back, his heart full to overflowing. I like you too, Amelia. And I promise to take very good care of both you and your mommy. Agent Chen cleared her throat gently. I hate to interrupt this beautiful family moment, but I do need to complete my debrief with both Mr. Blackwood and Ms. Williams when you're feeling up to it. Of course, Zara said. Theodore told me you've been investigating Kevin for months? We had our suspicions about financial irregularities at several restaurant chains, but Kevin was very careful about covering his tracks. It wasn't until we intercepted communications about his plan to frame Mr. Blackwood that we realized the scope of his operation. Communications? Theodore asked. Kevin was working with a network of corrupt managers across the Midwest. They would identify wealthy restaurant owners, embezzle funds while building false evidence against their targets, then either blackmail the owners or force them to sell their businesses at below-market prices. How many other people did he destroy? Zara asked quietly. At least 8 restaurant owners over the past 3 years. Some lost everything. Their businesses, their savings, their reputations. One man in Detroit took his own life rather than face the shame of criminal charges he didn't deserve. The room fell silent as the full weight of Kevin's cruelty settled over them. But thanks to your evidence and Mr. Blackwood's quick thinking, we were able to arrest the entire network. Kevin's victims will finally have their names cleared, and several will receive significant financial restitution. What about the employees who were threatened? Theodore asked. The people Kevin intimidated into silence? All charges against them have been dropped, and we're providing witness protection services for anyone who feels unsafe. Your company's offer to pay for counseling and relocation assistance has been very helpful. Agent Chen closed her notebook. I think that covers everything for now. Ms. Williams, take care of yourself. And Mr. Blackwood, the FBI owes you a debt of gratitude. Your courage probably saved dozens of lives. After Agent Chen left, the small family sat together in comfortable silence. Amelia had fallen asleep against her mother's side, exhausted by the morning's excitement. Zara stroked her daughter's hair with one hand while Theodore held the other. I can't believe this is real, Zara whispered. A week ago, I was struggling to pay rent and worried about keeping my job. Now you're engaged to a billionaire and planning your new life as a restaurant empire heiress? Theodore suggested with a smile. Now I'm planning my new life with the man I love and our daughter. The money and the restaurants are wonderful, but that's not what matters. What matters? That you chose to trust me. That you were willing to risk everything to save me. That you see Amelia and me as a family worth fighting for. Zara lifted their joined hands and kissed his knuckles. I love you, Theodore Blackwood. Not because you're rich or successful, but because you're good. Because you have integrity. Because you make me believe in happily ever after. 6 months later, Saturday, April 20th, 2024. The renovated O'Malley's Diner buzzed with excitement as guests arrived for the wedding reception. Theodore and Zara had exchanged vows that morning in a small ceremony at Lincoln Park Zoo, surrounded by close friends and family. But they'd insisted on holding their reception at the restaurant where their love story began, now transformed into a shining example of ethical business practices and employee welfare. The old O'Malleys had been completely renovated. Bright, welcoming spaces with comfortable seating, an open kitchen concept that allowed diners to watch their meals being prepared, and a dedicated play area for families with children. But more importantly, it had become a model for fair employment practices throughout Theodore's restaurant empire. Every employee now received health insurance, paid vacation time, and profit-sharing bonuses. There was an anonymous reporting system for workplace problems, regular visits from independent oversight committees, and a strict zero-tolerance policy for intimidation or abuse. Employee satisfaction ratings had skyrocketed, and the restaurant's profits had actually increased as word spread about their ethical practices. Zara, radiant in a flowing white dress with subtle silver embroidery, moved through the reception greeting guests. Her new role as Director of Employee Relations for Blackwood Hospitality Group had given her a platform to implement changes she'd only dreamed about as a struggling waitress. She'd also enrolled in night classes at Northwestern University, working toward her business degree while managing her new responsibilities. Mrs. Blackwood. Amelia came running up in her flower girl dress, a confection of pink tulle that she'd insisted on wearing with bright purple sneakers. Carlos wants to know if I can help serve cake to the tables. Carlos Martinez, the new manager of the renovated restaurant, had been personally trained by Theodore and Zara. He was exactly the kind of leader they wanted representing their company. Fair, compassionate, and genuinely invested in his employees' well-being. I think that's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. But be careful not to get frosting on your dress. Amelia nodded seriously and skipped back toward the kitchen, where she'd become an honorary member of the staff during their frequent visits to the restaurant. Theodore appeared at Zara's side, handsome in his charcoal gray suit. How does it feel, Mrs. Blackwood? Strange. Wonderful. Like I'm living in someone else's fairy tale. She leaned against his shoulder. I keep waiting to wake up. Well, if this is a dream, I don't want to wake up either. Theodore kissed the top of her head. Have I mentioned today that I love you? Only about 50 times since we woke up this morning. Then I'm behind schedule. I love you, Zara Blackwood. I love our daughter, our life, our future together. I love you too, Theodore. More than I ever thought possible. They were interrupted by the sound of clinking glasses. Jennifer Martinez, Theodore's assistant and now Zara's good friend, was calling for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The bride and groom would like to say a few words. Theodore and Zara moved to the center of the restaurant. Their guests gathered around them in a circle of warm faces and loving smiles. Thank you all for being here tonight, Theodore began. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be getting married in a diner in Chicago, I would have thought they were crazy. I was so focused on profit margins and quarterly reports that I'd forgotten what the restaurant business was really about. Bringing people together, creating community, taking care of each other. He looked at Zara with such tenderness that several guests dabbed at their eyes. My wife taught me that the most important ingredient in any recipe is love. Love for your craft, love for your customers, and love for the people who work alongside you every day. Zara took his hand and continued, "When I slipped that note under Theodore's coffee cup 7 months ago, I was terrified. I knew I was risking my job, my safety, maybe even my daughter's well-being. But I also knew that staying silent would mean watching good people get hurt by corruption and greed." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "What I didn't know was that speaking up would change my entire life. That it would lead me to love, to partnership, to a future I never dared to dream about." She looked around at the renovated restaurant, at the employees who had become like family, at the guests who had supported them through their journey. "This place represents everything we believe in: honest work, fair treatment, and the power of people to create something beautiful together." "So tonight, we want to make an announcement," Theodore added. "Effective immediately, every employee in the Blackwood Hospitality Group will receive stock options in the company. Because the people who make our restaurants successful deserve to share in that success." The applause was thunderous. Several employees wiped away tears, and Theodore saw Carlos exchange an emotional hug with his wife. Folks, what an incredible transformation! From a note slipped under a coffee cup to a love story that changed an entire business empire. Theodore and Zara proved that courage and integrity can overcome any obstacle, and that true love really can conquer all. What lesson from their journey resonates most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories of love conquering adversity. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in the power of second chances. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Theodore and Zara found themselves alone in the restaurant where their adventure had begun. Amelia had fallen asleep in one of the corner booths, and Carlos had draped a tablecloth over her like a blanket. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't recognized me that first day?" Theodore asked, pulling Zara into his arms for a slow dance to the soft jazz playing on the restaurant sound system. "I think we would have found each other eventually," Zara replied, resting her head against his chest. "Maybe not here, maybe not under these circumstances, but somehow. The universe has a way of bringing together people who are meant to be together." "Meant to be together," Theodore repeated thoughtfully. "I like the sound of that." They swayed together in the gentle light of the restaurant, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and celebration, holding their sleeping daughter and their boundless future in their hearts. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered with possibility, and Lake Michigan reflected the stars like scattered diamonds on dark velvet. The city that had brought them together continued its ancient rhythm of dreams and determination, love and loss, second chances and new beginnings. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.